Good
All
morning.
right then.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to What TV9 India Thinks Today. This is the second day, the start of the News9 Global Summit. In line with this year's theme, India poised for the next big leap. We've gathered here today to map out India's growth path, its strengths, its opportunities, and the challenges we could face as we leapfrog into becoming a developed nation or Viksit Bharat by 2047.
But Shweta, how exactly will the idea of a Viksit Bharat come to life amid global crisis? Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's a question that looms large, and at News9 Global Summit, we will try to get those answers for you. But before further ado, take a look at what's in store for you all today at TV9 What India Thinks Today, presented by Poonawalla FinCorp, co-powered by Zydus Wellness, Ultratech, Priya Gold, and Phenolex Cables. What a great list, ladies and gentlemen. A big round of applause for all the people that are going to come here on day one, day two, and the third day as well.
Well, remember, top policy makers, union ministers, and former heads of state are going to be a part of this mega thought fest, culminating with keynote address by none other than Prime Minister Narendra Modi himself at the Global Summit, the News9 Global Summit later tonight.
That's right, Shweta. And apart from India's brightest mind, dignitaries from across the world, delegates from almost 20 countries, and the India chiefs of 4 UN organizations, ladies and gentlemen, are gracing the event today. Not just that, TV9 What India Thinks Today is also soon going to be going global, ladies and gentlemen.
But for all those present here today, let's indulge you in what is News9 all about. Well, after dominating regional language news market for decades now, the TV9 network has forayed into English news in a brand new digital avatar through the News9 Mediaverse. Now, this comprises of 3 distinct offerings, Kabir.
Number 1, ladies and gentlemen, the world's first news OTT, News9 Plus. It offers cutting-edge Netflix-like news viewing experience with world-class UI and UX that beats global standards of content consumption.
and the News9 Live, India's first and only digital exclusive connected TV streaming platform that offers round-the-clock global, national, political, domestic, business and sports news.
And of course, News9Live.com for all of you, those out there that still like to read news in all its nuance and intricacy.
And leading from the front is TV9's MD and CEO Barun Das, who has marshaled all the editorial and marketing prowess of TV9 network to bring to you the second edition of TV9 What India Thinks Today, the News9 Global Summit. May I please invite on stage Barun Das to deliver his opening address.
Thank you, Shweta and Kabir. The Honorable Tony Abbott, former Prime Minister of Australia, Madam Maria Ahmed Didi, former Defense Minister of the Maldives, His Excellency Now Gilan, Ambassador of Israel, our distinguished guest, delegates from all over the world, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure and honor to welcome you all to the News9 Global Summit, which is the day 2 of TV9 What India Thinks Today. It's only the second edition of our flagship annual summit, but I'm delighted to tell you that it is far bigger in its scope and more novel in its architecture and formats. The summit theme ponders over a bold aspiration, India poised for the next big leap. Notably, to get an honest outside-in view, we have invited several distinguished leaders and experts from all over the world, in fact, from over 20 countries, to share their perspectives and prescriptions. TV9 Network is grateful to them for investing their time and energy in this enterprise. As a keen observer of the India story and the changing global dynamics, I say with confidence that both the decadal momentum and the geopolitical moment are in India's favor. There are two pillars of global dynamics, geopolitics and geoeconomics. On both counts, India is now the epicenter of global interest. Our country is being recognized as a new leader of the global South, not only as a champion for global peace, but also, as the IMF rightly said, a bright spot in the global economy. The other big economy is facing its own set of challenges. China's territorial ambitions are being seen as a threat to a rules-based world order, prompting democratic nations to shift away from it. For almost 3 decades, China grew exponentially, courtesy-free Western markets, even while keeping its own economy largely closed. Contrary to that, while India marches towards being the third largest economy, we believe that to prosper, we need to take others along. Hence, India's focus on one family, one earth, one future is the template the world needs. However, we understand that India's next big leap will not be without challenges. We still have major conflicts going on in Europe and West Asia that could flare up into global crisis at any time. At the same time, the process of deglobalization is going on. More and more countries want to be self-reliant in critical areas. If tariff walls go up around the world there would be greater friction in trade and commerce, significantly reducing benefits to consumers. The uncertainties in supply chains will also have a severe impact on inflation and could push millions into poverty. There are many issues India and the rest of the world have to deal with. As the day unfolds, you will get to hear some of the biggest and most important stakeholders and experts from India and abroad. Global CEOs, Indian cabinet ministers discuss a wide variety of key issues. And of course, we will get to hear the overarching vision for a new India, the dream of a Viksit Bharat from the architect of the plan himself, the Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi ji, later this evening. I have no doubt we will get several excellent insights, solutions, and actionable ideas from these conversations. Therefore, I invite you to make the most of the sessions and the networking opportunity. With that, let me hand you back to the MCs. Thank you very much and welcome.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Barun. It's now time to get the ball rolling and start with the very first keynote address of the day. Coming up on stage is a prominent face in the Indo-Pacific region.
Almost a decade since he left office as the Prime Minister of Australia, he continues to remain one of the most respected voices in Asia Pacific. Take a look at our first session today.
Asia Pacific to Indo-Pacific. A small change of one word, but geopolitically a giant leap to a new world order. Reflective of India's growing significance as a global force. A nation that has embraced the new order with open arms is Australia. A beacon of democracy and freedom, Australia is home to almost 1 million Indians. And one of the few countries to have an economic strategy specific to India. Tony Abbott is a man who has played a pivotal role in reshaping India-Australia ties. A man intimately familiar with India, its people, and its history. As a young man, Mr. Abbott traveled across India and also worked as a teacher's aide in an Australian Jesuit school in Bihar. A decade ago, as Australia's Prime Minister, Mr. Abbott forged new ties with India. Although now retired from active politics, Mr. Abbott's vision and dedication continue to elevate the India-Australia relations to ever newer heights. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Tony Abbott, former Prime Minister of Australia.
Welcome, sir. Welcome, the Honorable Mr. Tony Abbott, sir. Before we ask you to deliver your keynote address, may I please also call upon stage MD and CEO TV9 Network, Mr. Barun Das, to please come up on stage, sir, and felicitate the Honorable former Prime Minister of Australia, Mr. Tony Abbott. A loud round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. There you have it. Thank you so much, sir. I'm now going to have to request the former Prime Minister of Australia, Honourable Mr. Tony Abbott, to request him to deliver the global keynote address, the first of day 2. Over to you, sir.
Well, thank you. And I have to say, what a wonderful introduction, what a wonderful event, and how marvellous it is to be here in this fantastic country at this important time. Now, I have to say that for a long time, some outsiders said of India, it's a country of great potential, and always will be. To those sceptics, I declare that modern India remains a country of vast potential, but is already a country of great achievement. It's already the world's fifth largest economy, the fastest growing large economy, and will be the third largest within a couple of decades. It's still a developing country, but at least 80% of Indians, or something like 1.1 billion people, now have access to proper sanitation. Over 90% have access to good drinking water, and 97% have access to reliable power. Small things, maybe, in a geopolitical context, but they make a massive difference to people's lives. Thanks to the digital revolution, nearly every Indian adult is now economically and socially connected. There's long been a legendary rail network, but India is now building airports at the rate of 8 a year, urban metro systems at the rate of 1.5 a year, and national highways at the rate of 30 kilometres every single day. Last year, India became just the fourth country to land a space probe on the moon. And after several decades of the licence Raj, India is now roaring down the runway to economic takeoff. Companies such as the Ambani Group, Tata and Infosys are among the world's largest. There are 3 Indians among the world's 50 richest people, and there's now any number of ethnic Indians at the helm of major global businesses. And India isn't just the world's largest democracy, it's also one of the oldest, having been continuously democratic with just one tiny wobble for more than 3/4 of a century. India's democracy is older than Germany's and Spain's. It's older than France's Fifth Republic. India has had more changes of government than Japan. Its media is as free as America's, and its judiciary is as robustly independent as Britain's. India has long proven that a country need not be rich to be free, and it's now proving that freedom is no obstacle to rapid economic development. Yet mysteriously, India often ranks well down the global democracy lists produced by Freedom House and others. Perhaps that's because they think of Prime Minister Modi as a Hindu nationalist, when I think he's better called an Indian patriot who necessarily takes Hinduism seriously as by far the country's biggest creed. Sadly, faith in God and love of country are pretty rare in Western think tanks, which is why they find India's democracy easier to caricature than to understand. As Prime Minister a decade back, I used to describe India as, quote, the world's emerging democratic superpower. Under Modi, India is no longer a bystander, but increasingly a force in the world as one of the 2 democratic superpowers. And I'm confident that if there is to be a leader of the free world 50 or 100 years hence, it's as likely to be the Indian Prime Minister as the United States President. India has always been the superpower of the subcontinent. It's never been the aggressor in its wars and tensions, which it's always tried to resolve quickly, fairly, and in ways that allow others to be the best they can. And now, global leadership is beckoning. For a long time, India was a leader of the non-aligned movement, trying to stay aloof from big global struggles. Now, India is a leader of the global south, and as such speaks up for poorer countries to get the fair go they deserve, for all to have the respect and the national independence that India won for itself against the superpower of the day that was slow to acknowledge India's right to be free. To that end, India has now helped to form a new partnership for freedom and development. Unlike NATO, the Quad is not American-led. Indeed, it would not exist but for Shinzo Abe's foresight and determination, and for Narendra Modi's perception and magnanimity. Unlike NATO, the Quad is not a military alliance. Unlike NATO, it lacks formal structures. It's actually a bit like the Five Eyes, a largely informal network based on shared values, common interests and high ideals that's nonetheless helped to keep the peace for 7 decades. As Foreign Minister Jaishankar said on the weekend, the Quad is, quote, here to stay, here to grow, and here to contribute. And if that works out, with annual leaders' summits and scheduled officials' meetings, it certainly could be the most important strategic initiative since NATO. Even though it's not against anyone, it's for the rights of all to be free and aims to help all to be better off in a world of peace, national freedom and international cooperation to tackle global problems like underdevelopment, infrastructure poverty and environmental degradation. But that does mean standing strong against those who would breach the peace. The militarist, Islamist and communist dictatorships that think they have a right to impose their systems on others, and that could, if mishandled, plunge the world into a new dark age. The Russian dictator thinks he's on a mission from God to destroy Ukraine, even though its people have every right to look west rather than east. Apocalyptic Islam seeks a new Holocaust, expunging Israel from the river to the sea. And communist China bullies its neighbours, even India, as part of its oft-declared intention to be the global hegemon by 2050. Its next step is taking Taiwan, by force if necessary, a practically independent country of 25 million people that's never been under communist rule, that's hardly ever been governed from Beijing, and that's living, breathing proof that there's no totalitarian gene in the Chinese DNA. Now, as a backpacker in India 40 years ago, I spent 3 weeks in Bokaro Steel City as a kind of teacher's aide at St Xavier's School. So I do understand the practical help that the old Soviet Union gave to India at a critical time when the United States unwisely was tilting to Pakistan. And I can understand why India is reluctant to be publicly critical of Russia for historical and practical reasons, although PM Modi did indeed upbraid the Russian dictator at Samarkand for using war as an act of national policy. Even so, I've yet to meet an Indian who doesn't think that the wanton destruction of Ukrainian cities without the slightest attempt to minimise civilian casualties is simply evil. With greater strength comes greater responsibility. And that's my sense of where Prime Minister Modi is taking India. And it couldn't come at a more critical time. When India helps to preserve freedom of navigation in the Arabian Sea, that's not taking America's side against Iran. That's protecting the global commons. Likewise, any country that helped Taiwan to resist a Chinese invasion wouldn't be on the side of America against China, but on the side of democracy versus dictatorship. Were India to help Taiwan, a bit like it helped Bangladesh 5 decades back, far from playing the great power politics it's always deplored, it would be helping the weak against the strong in the eternal struggle to heed the better angels of our natures. The best hope of avoiding great power conflict in coming years is for free peoples everywhere to make it clear that an attack on one small country is an attack on everyone. So, my friends, there is no doubt that this will be an Indo-Pacific century, but with its unshakable commitment to democracy and the rule of law, let's hope that this Indo-Pacific century turns out to be more India's than China's.
Thank you, Mr. Abbott. I now request you to stay on stage. May I also call upon TV9 Network's R. Sridharan to join Mr. Abbott for a keynote interview.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the first session of Day 2, News9 Global Summit. Mr. Abbott, let me start by thanking you, first of all, for what I thought was a very honest and an accurate assessment of where India is today. Why don't we see more such honesty from more Western leaders?
Well, it's easier to be honest when you're retired. That's the sad truth. And probably being a bit too candid too often was one of the reasons why I was retired a little bit earlier than I would have liked.
So, no, but on a more serious note, if you look at the issue that we are facing with Canada as well, where there seems to be a total lack of appreciation of the problems, what India calls a problem, from a Canadian perspective, that extremists are allowed to operate from foreign soil and attack India. And some countries don't want to recognize that as a problem. So what would you say to such countries?
Well, if there were a nest of people operating in New Zealand, for argument's sake, who were determined to create mayhem and violence in Australia, we would be very keen as Australians to have the New Zealand government crack down on such individuals. And certainly I thought it was a mistake for the Australian government recently to readily permit entry into Australia of people from the United Kingdom and Canada who were known to be deeply subversive agitators, if you like, coming to Australia not for tourism, which we welcome, but for politics, which frankly we would rather not have amongst people claiming to be tourists. So I think a government such as Australia's and the Friends of India more generally need to be careful about allowing things to happen in their countries which make it needlessly difficult for the Indian government here at home. That said, obviously it is important for the Indian government here at home to be decent, respectful, to appreciate that in a democracy there will be dissent, that people are entitled to argue for a better chance and a fairer go for different parts of the country and so on. But it's one thing to say that the central government might not have been as sympathetic as it should have been to places X or Y. It's another thing to want to create violence and indeed secessionism inside the country.
Right. Now, I want to ask you a personal question, Mr. Abbott. You've known our Prime Minister, Mr. Modi, rather intimately over the last 10 years, and you have described him as a transformative leader. So when you've been a Prime Minister yourself, you're a global statesman. So what do you think makes him a transformative leader? How is he different from other global leaders that you interact with?
Well, there's probably three things, I suppose, about Prime Minister Modi. One, extremely unusual. One, unusual in an Indian context. And one, I would say, necessary for any effective leadership. The extremely unusual thing about Prime Minister Modi is that as a young man, he was sufficiently spiritually minded to spend at least a year as a virtual monk in the Himalayas. Now, as someone who spent 3 years in a seminary myself, before realising that I was a square peg in a round hole, I appreciate someone who gets that the world is not just the here and now. It's not just all about money and materialism. And I think that adds a dimension to Prime Minister Modi which is rare and that people can sense. And I think the inspirational quality that he brings ties back to that. The other thing about Prime Minister Modi is that he is in no sense an establishment figure. He doesn't come from an established business or political dynasty. And at least in the early days, he had no links with any such things. And given that for a long time, India was dominated by the Congress, which tended to be very much the establishment, I think in that sense, Prime Minister Modi has been a people's voice in a way that a lot of national politicians haven't always been. The third thing is that he's had an agenda. He has wanted India to be less of a bystander and more of an actor on the global stage. He has wanted the Indian economy to be more efficient. He has wanted the ordinary lives of Indians to be better. I mean, the drive to electrify the couple of 100 million Indians, to electrify the lives of the couple of 100 million Indians who had no access to reliable power. They're transformative, completely transformative. I mean, the drive to extend proper sanitation to hundreds of millions of people. I mean, I can remember what India was like 40 years ago in terms of sanitation. And okay, it's not a big deal geopolitically, but by God, it makes a difference. So I think he's had a very strong domestic agenda. Help people's lives in practical ways, strengthen the country in practical ways through infrastructure and so on, and as best you can, given the fact that you can't push the envelope too far, try to liberalise and reform the economy.
Right. So you touched upon in your speech how India is now emerging as a leader of the global south. But when we look around the world, there's still a lot of reluctance among, especially the developed nations, the Western nations, to admit that there might be a larger role for India in that sort of a scenario. Why do you think the world is still not ready to accept that India is actually the default leader for global south?
Look, the global south is not a term I particularly like or use myself. I mean, the global south seems to be shorthand for countries that feel they haven't always got a fair go. Now, I accept that in many cases that's the case. But personally, I would rather be involved in a leadership role in a community of values rather than simply a community of disadvantage or perceived victimhood. And I don't think the developed world, in inverted commas, is at all reluctant to see India in a leading role. The Quad is a classic example of three developed countries' eagerness to see India taking a leadership role. And I know this might be hard to credit, and I know it's not something that America is always very good at in practice, but I think at least in principle the Americans understand that the Quad will only work if India is at least as much its leader as the United States. Right. This is not an American-led partnership. This is a partnership of equals, at least where India and America are concerned. Right. And if the Americans forget that, the Quad won't work.
Right. You touched upon China in your speech, Mr. Abbott. I want to ask you a very straight question. How real is a scenario where China actually attacks Taiwan and tries to take over the country?
A government which ultimately is based on fear cannot afford to make threats that it doesn't carry out. And the Beijing regime routinely threatens to take Taiwan by force if necessary, and routinely promises its own people that it will be the global hegemon by mid-century. I think there's no doubt that China would have moved on Taiwan years ago if it thought it could get away with it. Obviously, until quite recently, there was no real match between China and America militarily. Today, there are enormous questions over whether the American Navy could operate in the Western Pacific without suffering massive losses in a full-scale conflict with China. That means that China's ability to take Taiwan is growing by the day. Now, I don't think China wants war. I think that China wants to win without war. That's the classic, the art of war, is it not? To win without fighting. So I think that's what China would prefer. But let's not be under any misapprehension. The thing that drives the Chinese leadership every moment of every day, other than their preservation in power, is to overcome the century of humiliation and having snuffed out the practical freedom of Hong Kong in violation of the treaty that they signed, they are now absolutely focused on taking Taiwan as quickly as they can, if possible, without a fight. But every day there is grey zone warfare going on against Taiwan. Every day there is military belligerence being practiced against Taiwan. And if they think the rest of the world, particularly the United States, is sufficiently distracted by other things, if they think that perhaps their own position is becoming fragile and needs to be shored up by a foreign adventure, that is when I think we are at a point of maximum danger.
Right. So, Mr. Abbott, we already have two regional conflicts happening. One, Russia, Ukraine, then between Israel and Palestine. Is the world maybe just a badly aimed nuclear tactical missile away from a nuclear war? I mean, how grave is a global conflict likely, to your mind? How do you rate the chances of a global conflagration?
Look, I hate talking about this because the Great War was horrific. The Second World War was even worse. And a new global conflict would be by several orders of magnitude worse than anything we've ever seen before. I mean, the statement of Einstein, I don't know how the next war will be fought, but the one after that will be fought with sticks and stones. I mean, I think there is much in that depressing observation. So I think we've got to do everything we humanly can to avoid it. But weakness is not the way to avoid the next conflict. Weakness is provocative. The only way to keep the peace is to maintain deterrence. And that doesn't mean being crazy brave, but it certainly means being strong enough to let any substantial aggressor know that aggression will not pay because the price is just too high. Now, to go to the Ukraine, if Ukraine is not supported, at least at the level that it has been up till now, Putin will win because of the disparity of size. And if Putin wins in Ukraine, there will be a new Iron Curtain. At the very least, there will be a new Iron Curtain in Eastern Europe and a new arms race in that important part of the world. And that's assuming that having taken Ukraine, he won't then go for the other parts of Greater Russia, of formerly Greater Russia, that he thinks rightly belong to Mother Russia. Right. And then in the Middle East, well, look, I'm not saying that Hamas acted at the instructions of Tehran, but Hamas is a creature of Tehran, just as Hezbollah is a creature of Tehran. And Tehran is completely committed to the obliteration of Israel, and the Israelis, understandably, are completely committed to their survival. And there is substantial risk of escalation. And I guess the difference between the militarist Putin on the one hand, the communist commissars in Beijing on the other hand, and the apocalyptic Islamists is that at least Putin and Xi are broadly rational, whereas the apocalyptic Islamists are not rational in any meaningful sense. They believe that death in the pursuit of jihad is not something to be risked but avoided if possible. They think this is, in a sense, the culmination of life on Earth.
One final question, because our time's already up, Mr. Abbott. When we talk about the Indo-Pacific region and reframing the relationships there, I think the elephant in the room clearly is China. By all indications, China's economy is going to be in some sort of a slump, at least for the next 5 years. Do you think that's going to lead to some sort of a re-engineering of its own political system? Is it going to have any impact at all? Will the communist grip loosen? What do you think will happen to China, let's say, in the 5 years if the economy doesn't do well?
Well, I think the implicit deal that the communists have offered the Chinese people is you surrender your freedom to us and we will give you wealth. And this is why Taiwan is such a problem, because Taiwan shows that Chinese people can be both rich and free, indeed richer in Taiwan than they are in mainland China itself. So any significant slowdown in the Chinese economy is obviously going to threaten such legitimacy that the commissars have. And this is why I think an economically fragile China is more dangerous than an economically successful China, because dictatorships tend to look for a foreign adventure when they need to rally the people and distract the people, if you like, from their own domestic failings. So, yes, it does look like the Chinese economy is in a degree of trouble. Really not surprising, given that the market freedom that was significantly allowed in the post-Deng Xiaoping era has now been dramatically scaled back. Not surprising that the Chinese economy is in trouble. But rather than have them focus more domestically, it could actually drive a bit of adventurism abroad, which would be extremely problematic and dangerous for all of us.
Right. Mr. Abbott, we have completely run out of time, but I really appreciate the candor and the thoughtfulness that you brought to this conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give Mr. Abbott a big round of applause.
Mr. Tony
Thank you so
Abbott,
much, sir.
Sridharan, thank you very much for joining us here on the stage. Economically fragile China is perhaps more dangerous than a China doing well. I believe that's the message coming in as far as the global south
Absolutely,
is
Shweta.
concerned.
The Indo-Pacific, this century is of the Indo-Pacific, and like the Honourable former Prime Minister of Australia, he said it himself, the Quad is here to stay, and it is here to grow, ladies and gentlemen. All right then, up next is the first panel discussion of the day, ladies and gentlemen. And what a great segue, because we've already been talking about the West Asian conflict, we've been talking about the war between Russia and Ukraine, and the world is increasingly feeling the pressure of war and disruptions with geopolitical tensions, especially in the recent years, particularly, just like I mentioned, the Russia-Ukraine war, and of course, also at the same time, the West Asian conflict. They have been having a profound impact on the global economy, with sanctions and counter-sanctions affecting trade relations and investment flows. Of course, to fluctuations in oil prices, influencing consumer spending and overall economic sentiment.
And amid all the global gloom and doom, India has emerged as a shining beacon of light. India's commitment to fostering peace extends beyond its borders, engaging in multilateral forums and peacekeeping missions. India promotes dialogue among nations, emphasizing cooperation over confrontation. Take a look.
Not an era of war. War is all-engulfing. And bloodshed not limited to just human life. Russia-Ukraine war disrupted the global economy. And the West Asian conflict has trade routes compromised. No one anywhere in the world is insulated from the ravages of war. But peacemakers are what the world looks up to. Can the global south rise to set an example of leadership amid global crises? Can India's astute diplomacy host peace as the unifier? Let's tell the world that this is not an era of war, India as a global peace catalyst.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen. And to discuss India's role as a catalyst of peace, let me call upon stage Valina Chakarova, geopolitical strategist and founder, Face for a Conscious Experience. Very warm welcome, ma'am. Also with us is Maria Ahmad Didi, former Minister of Defense of the Republic of Maldives. Very warm welcome to you. Joining us on the podium is also going to be Syed Akbaruddin, former permanent representative of India to the United Nations and Dean of Kautilya School of Public Policy. And of course, give it up for His Excellency Naur Gilon, Ambassador of Israel to India. Very warm welcome to you, sir. I would also like to request TV9 Network's Aditya Rajkal to moderate this session. Aditya, can we please have you on stage? Many thanks. Over to you.
Well, delighted to welcome you all here at the TV9 News9 Global Summit. It's good to have you back here to discuss something that is very closely followed here in India and all across the globe. We are living in a time where Prime Minister Narendra Modi's words, not an era of war, resonated not just at the SCO summit, but through the G20 as well, that took place not very far from here at the Bharat Mandapam in New Delhi. There was a consensus, an unthinkable consensus that really happened at the G20. Because I was there, and the foreign policy wonks from all across the globe really hinted that this would be a disaster, just like what happened perhaps at Bali. But suddenly appeared Prime Minister Narendra Modi from nowhere on the very first day and said that a consensus had been achieved. Today, we discuss not an era of war, India as a global peace conflict, as a peace catalyst. And at the same time, we have to also understand and sink in this reality that we are living in a time when there are two simultaneous wars happening. There's been enough devastation after the 7th October terror attacks in southern Israel, in Gaza as well. And at the same time, with the statement from Ukraine which said that 31,000 lives have been lost ever since the war 2 years ago. What is the end game for Russia? What is the end game for Israel here in this war? And of course, just like the Honorable Tony Abbott really mentioned a few minutes ago, that people are closely monitoring developments in Taiwan as well. Valina, let me come to you first. Well, you spoke recently at Raisina, you've spoken in Cape Town before this, and you've been observing developments in Europe very, very closely. We've had a situation where Prime Minister Narendra Modi has been speaking both to the Russian president and, of course, Zelensky from Ukraine. We've decided to have a very independent position to the shock of many in Europe. From the day one, if I could say so, they've been preaching India in many ways. And we've seen External Affairs Minister Jaishankar's remarks on this as well. But how do you see the situation developing now? And how do you see India's role in this new international order?
Thank you for having me. It's a great pleasure being here. Let me first outline very shortly how I see the, let's say, ongoing war. In my view, the war will continue at least up until 2025, 2026. We are going to face a new, let's say, stage of escalation. This year, Russia has the upper hand. It is going to further mobilize. It has successfully bypassed Western sanctions, let's say to a great extent, even though that the West will introduce further packages. As we speak, just the 13th package was introduced by the European Union, apropos for the very first time also including an Indian company. And at the same time, actually, we've heard already from the speech of Mr. Abbott, the goal, the calculus of Russia is very clear what it is really about. It's first and foremost about, of course, Ukraine, and it is about the whole of Ukraine. So the longer the war lasts, the less of Ukraine will remain from Russia's position. That means that in a next step, they can move again against, let's say, the capital, Kiev, and they can try to seize more territory. But in the meantime, of course, they will be eyeing diplomatic negotiations. Why? Because this will legitimize already the controlled territories. Right now, they control around 17 to 18% of Ukraine's territory. They also want to legitimize Crimea as Russian one. So all we know, it is about the subjugation of the whole of Ukraine, but it is about more than that. Russia wants a new European security order. In fact, it wants to destroy the current security order, which has been more or less built up and settled for the last 30 years following the end of the Cold War. Russia wants a new game in which it could actually play off different European states against each other. It could have Russia-friendly governments because we will have also elections, and at some point of time in the future, as you know, there will be economic repercussions, there will be greater geo-economic pain, and we have already actually a lot of things happening in terms of political forces, for instance, on the far right, but also on the far left, which pretty much actually side with the Russian position. But it is also about a new position of Russia in a new great game, in the long game, which is actually the new global order, where two forces, United States and China, are competing over the future of the global order. And here, Russia wants the pole position. Russia is a game changer. Russia has sided with China before making a move on Ukraine. And by siding with China, it has gotten also the comprehensive support. So what is India's stake here? First and foremost, India is going to bet on India. So it's going to try to take the best of the two worlds. In fact, I will argue that it is in all our interest to have a very strong India, geopolitically and geoeconomically, because this is probably the only breach in the world right now, trying to somehow balance two almost impossible, actually, partners. That is the West on the one side and Russia and China by extension on the other. So it is only India that is able to talk to all of these, relevant players and try to talk some sense because of the worst case scenario, which is a kind of, let's say, miscalculation, or even, as some worry, the breakout of a third, world war or even nuclear exchange. Now, I myself don't see this kind of risk happening, neither nuclear exchange, nor actually a World War III. In fact, what I see is already the manifestation of a Cold War 2.0, like I said, between the West on the one side and China and Russia on the other. It's not just China, it's China and Russia. And here, India is going to play a critical role to, like I said, to bridge these two impossible worlds.
Well, certainly there's a rebalancing that is at play here. And the question really is also that is the West increasingly pushing Russia towards China. But there are territorial advances that Russia had recently, just ahead of the elections, if I can call them elections in Russia. And at the same time, the war hasn't seen the last day yet. But Ambassador Gillon, if I can come to you, the second war will enter the 6th month in a few days from now. We've had enough devastation. Of course, India was one of the first countries to condemn the terror attack in southern Israel, which lost, unfortunately, more than 1,400 lives. We saw the gory visuals out there. And immediately after that, Israel went into Gaza to create a new reality, a new Gaza, a new paradigm shift in that area, really. But now, there have been enough violence. More than 29,000 people, according to the local officials at least, who have died. Your assertion, when I interviewed you earlier as well, was that we want to create this new reality and we want to eradicate Hamas, really, because this is really not between Israel and Palestine, this is Israel's fight against Hamas. But what is the end game for Israel? What is this new reality? Who will govern Gaza? And will you at least have a roadmap in the next 6 months?
Yeah, thank you, Aditya. I would say that the goals that we set in the outset have not changed. We put forward two main goals. One is, of course, the release of the hostages. So far, we released some, but there are more than 130 still there. And the other thing is to make sure that Hamas will not have the capacity to repeat its atrocities as it is on October 7, meaning dismantling its military power and its rule of Gaza. So these are the aims. Israel has no ambitions whatsoever to rule Gaza. No one wants to rule Gaza. That's part of the problem. We left Gaza in 2005 in the disengagement. We dismantled about 20 communities. We took out about 10,000 Jews living in the Gaza Strip, and we have no ambition whatsoever to go in. So the long-term thing is hopefully to create a new reality for the Gazans. We are not in war with the people of Gaza, and we want someone else to have the civilian support, the control of their lives there. We unfortunately do not see anyone who can take now the military part of it, so we will have to maintain it until a new reality is created, political reality in Gaza that will enable us also to not to be there from the military point of view.
Thank you so much. Let me get in the former Defense Minister of Maldives, Maria Didi. Now, we have interviewed you very recently about the unfortunate developments that really happened. But in that context, really, we had President's visit to China. We have had some significant statements coming in from him. But there's also the Maldives economy that is suffering immensely, especially in the recent weeks. But traditionally, we've had very good ties, historic cultural ties between India and Maldives. At the same time, we've had a robust defense cooperation. There has been a lot of aid that has been sent to Maldives as well. In this new reality, a new government in power, do you see India and Maldives coming together like before again? Do you think there will be course correction diplomatically and politically that will be done by Maldives? Especially because tourism is one of the biggest sectors out there. And at the same time, the big elephant in the room is China. At a time when the Chinese spy ship through Sri Lanka has moved towards Maldives, where do you see this equation, really? Because China is pretty far from Maldives, and as always known in the last many years, India has been the 911 call for Maldives all the time, and India has displayed brotherhood always. How do you see the relations up ahead?
Interesting question. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me. It's nice to be back in incredible India, a place where I was first introduced to unity in diversity. I did my schooling here, and where I had the first taste for democracy. Now, the question you ask is very interesting, because traditionally in Maldives, we had our defense policy based on foreign policy. And the policy has always been that, we don't encourage aggression. We don't encourage anger. Our first line of defense is diplomacy and dialogue. The second line of defense is also diplomacy and dialogue. And as third and last final thing, we only work as a defense force, the Maldivian defense force. Now, although the present government, which came in very recently, have made very different remarks and acted very different from how we have traditionally been. I mean, any Maldivian government that gets elected, their first point of call is a foreign visit is to New Delhi to visit the Delhi government. But this government has acted different. Now, what is happening is the Indian Ocean has become a hotspot for strategic rivalry. And Maldives, everybody knows Maldives to be this very super holiday destination, famous for its like Louis Vuitton of resorts. But the changing strategic environment and strategic rivalry, and also Maldives having through or near its archipelago sea lanes of communication, which makes up about 1/3 of the global commerce. There has been increasing rivalry, and that is affecting the Maldives' domestic politics as well. So we see a shift, but during our administration, we have always had the think that diplomacy, dialogue, keeping good relations with neighbors is what works. I mean, in an era where you all have said, this is not an era of war. This is an era of, and where the topic today is where India can be a global peacemaker, its role. The thing is, we do not want our territory to be a place for proxy wars or anything like that. There was this war in Europe, and it has affected our tourism industry. Ukraine was amongst the 10 top arrivals in Maldives pre-war. Now, we do not have any tourists coming from Ukraine. And that has a significant impact on Maldives. Even otherwise, when there's a war in Europe, certain uncertainties that it creates has impact on Maldives too. So we cannot think of any country that will not be affected, because we are talking about Maldives, a smaller nation because it's a group of islands. But we are still talking about an impact any war anywhere creates on our economies as well. So for us to get into this rivalry and try to take sides is not how we want it to be. As you said, we've always had good ties with India. India has been our first responder, and I believe, will be as well, because it is natural. Look at our, if you look at our threats, security threats as well, it's all transnational. Climate change, which is an existential threat to us. If something happens to our country, just like the Asian tsunami, the closest neighbor who will come and who can come to help would be India, because we are just about 700 kilometers from Cochin. And if you look at a major oil spill, because the sea lanes of communication goes through or near Maldives, the 8-degree channel has about 16 million barrels of crude oil passing through it. So if there is a major oil spill, just like what happened in Sri Lanka, India was there to help them. Now, a major oil spill like that can be disastrous for Maldives, because we rely on our maritime domain for our livelihood. Let it be the shores where the tourists enjoy their the diving, fishing, whatever you name it. A major oil spill would be disastrous, so we would rely on close neighbors.
Right.
So what I'm saying is, in this era, what you all are saying, when Prime Minister Modi went to Washington, he said he has said it publicly and directly, that this is not an era of war, and diplomacy and dialogue should prevail, and everyone should stop this bloodshed and human suffering. Now, India is part of the United Nations. India is part of the Quad. India is part of SAARC. India is part of the BRICS as well. So they are poised, for being a global peacemaker. And you have publicly said that you do not want to see an era of war. And we Maldivians have always subscribed to peace and stability in the region.
Absolutely. Well, that's the theme of the summit as well, India poised for the next big leap. But Ambassador Akbaruddin, you are someone who has worked very closely with Prime Minister Narendra Modi in different capacities over the last 1 decade. And you've seen the significant shifts that have happened in this foreign policy. India's power push, India being known, recognized, and consulted at the global forums. And particularly, you also dealt with China and Pakistan very closely, especially at the United Nations. Do you see India as this peace catalyst? Do you believe in this statement, axiom of the Prime Minister, not an era of war? Because the reality seems to be very different. Although India has taken a very independent stance, but India's foreign policy, the dynamic change that has really happened, how do you really define this from the SCO to the G20? And also, finally, India coming to the rescue of all stranded Indians, something that hasn't really been talked about as much. From Ukraine, where 22,000 people were stranded, even those Americans and Chinese and others were stranded, but nobody really came to their rescue. At the same time, recently in Qatar, the 8 Navy veterans who were rescued, the unthinkable rescue and release that really happened. How do you define this change in the foreign policy, the dynamic energy that Prime Minister really brings in?
So thank you, Aditya, for giving me an opportunity to engage with you. Let me start by saying that the pursuit of foreign policy is amongst the most difficult pursuits of any public policy. Because we work in an architecture where there is no sovereign, unlike domestic politics where there is sovereign authority. So it's a very competitive field. It's a field where sometimes competition leads to conflict. Doing well in that requires, if I may say, 3 or 4 big things to be ticked off. One, you require domestic stability. No country can take on a greater role if it doesn't have domestic stability. Look at India for the last 10 years. We have, because domestic stability is the basis for socio-economic growth. We have good social economic growth. So we've ticked that under Prime Minister Modi. What's the next thing that you would want to, for a good activist foreign policy? Number 2, I would say, is a leadership which is willing to take risks. And let's not forget, when Prime Minister Modi became the Prime Minister 10 years ago, he had no experience of foreign policy, yet his first big move was something that foreign policy analysts never thought of, including me. I was then in the foreign ministry. He decided to call all South Asian leaders to his inaugural. This was anathema, yet it reflected a willingness to take risks. So in the Prime Minister, we have a leader who's willing to take risks, and over the last 10 years, he's now established himself as a global figure. So you've ticked off another box. What's the third thing that you would require? You require a good tool or instrument of foreign policy in the diplomatic service, and India has always had a diplomatic service which has been well known for its diplomatic prowess. It's now increased in size. It's now becoming more globalist in its nature internally, in the sense we are taking in people from others. So you've ticked 3 boxes. What is left? The 4th box is you need opportunities. And as was said, that this is a period of tumult. This is a period where there are challenges, but amongst challenges have been numerous opportunities. You've listed some of them. So what happens if you have an period of tumult with opportunities? All you need is a willingness to be more active. And a growing India has shown that. When Prime Minister Modi says that this is not an era of war, it doesn't mean that there will not be wars, because wars are endemic, conflict is endemic to the international system. What he means is that there are no solutions that can be brought about by wars. So if there are no solutions that are going to be brought about by wars, you need other solutions, and that perhaps diplomacy, peacemaking, etc. are the way. So I would think going forward, if India ticks all the 3-4 boxes above and the world is going to be tumultuous, get ready for a more activist foreign policy where India starts shouldering greater public goods. It's not only in terms of our digital infrastructure, but also in terms of peace and security. So I would think down the line, towards the end of this year, you will find a more activist India, more keen to be willing to take on global responsibilities of a kind it has not taken in the past.
If I can just quickly, because we are out of time now, Valina, you recently in Cape Town said that India is a leader of the global South. But where does
Advocate.
Where does it put China really? Is China, on the other hand, looking to be the leader of the global North?
Yes, what we are going to witness is a kind of a geoeconomic competition between China and India, and to some extent also Russia, because Russia has still the Soviet networks in many of these countries, in Latin America, in Africa, in Asia. And if you operate with my scenario, which is, as I said, Cold War 2.0, with a lot of hotspots as we speak, the number of military conflicts and war is the highest since the end of the Cold War, right? So you're going to have more of these hotspots, and of course, a lot of them, unfortunately, are going to happen in the global South. So there will be a dire need for more voices, for those who are voiceless. And here, India is going to present its own narrative. As it was already outlined, it's going to be a narrative of a new power that doesn't have a colonial past. Of course, Russia's narrative is to create actually an anti-imperial, anti-American, anti-colonial narrative, and it has successfully worked in the past, and I argue it will once again successfully work in the future. And China has a geoeconomic competition there. It is about the BRI. A lot of these countries are, to some extent, indebted. And of course, it is about the Chinese, presence and the way how China actually understands geostrategy. So what we may see is, of course, a kind of a competition with obviously non-military means about transport corridors, energy corridors, infrastructure projects, that kind of things. But more so, of course, we will see a bigger push for the G20 as, let's say, counter-narrative to the G7, because the G20 is all about development. So the power that will create a message on development, how development can be steered, let's say, bottom up, not just top down, because Chinese project is top down. This is going to be the most successful formula in my case.
Well, we will be watching that very closely. But quickly to Ambassador Gillon, really, a comment on India. India and Israel are very important strategic partners. We have a very robust defense and technological partnership. But at the same time, India has been at the aid of Palestine as well. We've helped them. We've recently given them a lot of humanitarian aid through Egypt. How do you see this balancing? At the UN as well, India has come to the rescue of Palestine, at the same time believes firmly in the two-state solution.
So I don't see a contradiction here. We all understand that at the end of the day, as was said before, we have to go to for a diplomatic or other solution. What we are doing now is to open the way for such a solution in the future. What India did, I think, from day one and was led by Honorable Prime Minister Modi, in the afternoon of October 7, he already came out very strongly against the attack and against terrorism. And this was a very persistent view of India all along the way. Speaking of aid, we are also maximizing the support for aid because, as I said before, we have no quarrel with the Palestinian people. Before in the session, someone said a war between Israel and Palestine. It's an utter mistake. It's a war between Israel and an extreme terror organization, ISIS-like, called Hamas. We have no quarrel with the Palestinian Authority or the Palestinian people. So aid to the Palestinians is our interest as much as anyone else's. When it comes to a political solution, what will be the political solution? It's a big question. For a two-state solution, you need a strong and credible partner on the other side. I must say that so far the Palestinian Authority did not prove themselves as such. We just go back to 2005 when Israel left Gaza to the Palestinian Authority. In 2006, they lost the elections to Hamas, and 2007 kicked out by force. So we have to make sure, and what happened since then, a failed state was created in Gaza, which attacked Israel over the years. It wasn't once or twice. We were attacked periodically. Deterrence that was mentioned here, the more we created deterrence, we had a little bit more time of peace and quiet. But what happened on October 7 is a watershed. It's not the same skirmishes or small wars. This is a full-fledged war, and that's why Hamas has to be out of the picture, because you cannot deal with these extreme fundamentalists. They are not looking for a two-state solution. They are looking for the extinction of the State of Israel, as was mentioned by the Honorable Prime Minister. Iran is just the Supreme Leader just a couple of days ago again spoke of the annihilation of Israel off the map. I don't know any other country that is threatened to be destroyed. So I don't see any problem with the fact that India is supporting a political solution at the end, diplomatic political. We are also looking for that, and now giving humanitarian and standing strong against terrorism.
Fair enough. India, of course, stands against terrorism. There have been several statements that have been made. And one gentleman who's on the panel, Syed Akbaruddin, has been very vociferous at the UN. And that brings us to the end, unfortunately, of this panel because we are out of time. And, of course, on terrorism, India stands against it. There is perhaps time for UN reforms as well, reforms at the UN permanent membership level as well. And Prime Minister's words, not an era of war, really resonating out there. And perhaps we are looking towards India increasingly putting up a very dynamic phase, a new role as a global peace conflict in the coming months and years. Thank you so much to everyone for joining us.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Aditya. Thank you so much, Mr. Akbaruddin, His Excellency Naor Gilon, Maria Didi, and of course, Mrs. Chakarova as well. Many thanks. Even as the photo ops are going to continue to take place, ladies and gentlemen, this is in fact day 2. We were just talking about India acting as a catalyst of peace. This is not an era of war, ladies and gentlemen. Day 2 of TV9. What India Thinks Today, News9 Global Summit presented by Poonawalla FinCorp, co-powered by Zydus Wellness, Ultratech, Priya Gold and Phenolex Cable, special partners Servocon and Prabhuji.
And with that, it's time to kickstart our new session. And before we do that, Kabir, do you sometimes wonder if AI will replace you and me?
Well, of course, Shweta, as we dive headfirst into the world of artificial intelligence, it's like stepping into a whole new universe of endless opportunities and big-time questions. I mean, seriously, ladies and gentlemen, AI could totally shake things up, make our lives easier, turning industries upside down, you name it.
Absolutely, Kabir. And like Alice, I'm a little concerned about how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Well, it seems like it goes quite deep, Shweta, exactly. What about the dark side of the boon as well? Today, ladies and gentlemen, we're all about digging into both the cool stuff about AI and the challenges that artificial intelligence brings, trying to be smart about how we handle it all.
And to try and make sense of what AI will do, to what extent it will change our lives, take a look.
2023, the rise of the machine and its dark underbelly too. Will 2024 tame AI or unleash its true potential? Will artificial general intelligence make machines smarter than humans? Is the world ready for such disruption? The battle of innovation versus regulation rages on. Will India rewrite its IT success story with AI? Let's process AI, the promise and pitfalls.
And to talk more about the promises and pitfalls of artificial intelligence, I have a dynamic panel with me. Let me call upon Alok Shukra, Director AI Vision, Samsung Research. Professor Anurag Merrill, he's a professor of biotech at Stanford, specializing in AI. Mr. Shailesh Kumar, Chief Data Scientist, Center of Excellence, AI ML, Reliance Jio. Shamik Roy, Executive Director, Corporate, Medium and Small Businesses, Microsoft India. Jonathan Bronfman, entrepreneur, film producer, co-president Mars. And of course, Karthik Malhotra to take the floor and moderate the session.
Over to you, Karthik.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for being here with us. I think we are still waiting for Mr. Shailesh Kumar to join us, but while he comes, let's warm up to what the promise and what the pitfalls of AI are all about. Shamik Roy, if I can start by asking you, Microsoft, of course, the company which is one of the lead investors into OpenAI, and I saw the videos produced by Sora just a few days ago, and honestly, scared like hell. Am I going to be in my job next year? You know, the AV that just played, my friend Justin and his team took about 2 weeks producing it. What's going to happen now? Am I really required?
Good question to start with. But look, this is AI, okay? And this is just one of the things which is coming and going to come. There'll be many such applications as we go by. But let me step back. I think this question of job creation or job elimination has always come whenever there has been an invention. And especially if the invention is big, which created an industrial revolution. Let me just step back. When steam came in and steam engine came in, people at that time spoke about a lot of manual processes going away. When electricity came in, people said, a lot of now processes will get faster and people will lose jobs. When computers came in, and we all can go back to that time, people say there'll be so many jobs that will go away. When internet came in, online news came in, people will said people will stop reading print news. When online trading came in, correct, people said that's the end of brick and mortar. But just step back. India, after computers, became the womb of IT companies. Not only we have the biggest IT companies in the world, we exported talent, which brought the Indian economy up. Look at online trading. Not only are more retail shops opening, but people are also selling online and also selling brick and mortars.
Right.
So jobs will remain. This is the elasticity of the job market. The skill sets will change. And you need to change skill sets to be relevant, correct? The good thing is AI is basically making people do expertise faster. It's lower the learning curve. What does it mean?
So we're back to efficiency being the parameter.
Yeah. What does it mean? The previous era was about knowledge at the fingertips. With AI, you have expertise at the fingertips, which means that you will be able to do a job better and faster, and new skills will happen. So it's about new skills. It's about enabling even frontline people and healthcare workers to do jobs faster and better.
Right.
And that's what will happen.
All right. Well, let me take this to Mr. Shailesh Kumar. Of course, you're chief data scientist at Jio. Jio, as we know, is the largest telecom operator in the country. How many jobs are you creating using AI as a requirement when you're employing people in the new age section of artificial intelligence?
Very good. So thank you for inviting me. And,
thank you.
So let me talk a little bit about the evolution of AI use cases from the last 20 years to the next 20 years. I think that is the right context.
I think let's straight away move to the next 20 years. So that is what everybody is concerned about. We've seen what's happened in the past. Let's see what the future entails for us.
So if you look at the last 20 years, we have done great search engines and chat GPTs. We are really culminating an era and starting a new era now in AI. But the next 20 years is all going to be about the social transformation of society, right? Like if you ask a farmer or a teacher or a patient or a mother, what has AI done for them? We have no answer yet, right? If you ask a media company or a sports company or a manufacturing company or a search company, yes, AI has done great things, but the common masses have not yet felt the power of AI, right? And the next 20 years is going to be about that. If you look at the India strategy paper on AI, it's all about, healthcare, education, agriculture, mobility. The social transformation through AI is a very, unfinished agenda of AI.
Right.
And I think that's where a lot of our focus will be. A lot of companies, a lot of countries are now focusing on that.
Right.
And I think we should be upbeat about what that will do to farmers. Well, drones are doing their work and they don't have to worry about it.
Right. I will discuss the social contract that AI has with society with Professor Myral here. But in just a minute, let's just stick to who all are getting impacted with AI right now. Who are the folks who are actually out there with the opportunity that they are seeing? They also seem to be a little fearful of what the future unfolds. So Jonathan, let me first bring you into this conversation. For all of us here, Mr. Jonathan, of course, is an acclaimed filmmaker, film producer, and he, I'm sure, has watched those videos produced by Sora, and I'm just stuck with Sora in my head right now. How is your crew going to reskill or reduce in numbers with the advent of Sora?
What we saw with Sora is incredible, completely remarkable. I think changed a lot of people's perspectives with respect to AI. Specifically with what we're doing, we're trying to dissolve boundaries and we're trying to dissolve borders and make content in native tongues more digestible and more accessible. And so what we're trying to do is actually not taking away any jobs. What we're doing is something that's completely new and without the advancement of artificial intelligence would literally be impossible.
Okay, so talk about, let's say, your experience of making your film Race back in 2017, if I'm not mistaken. If you were to make that again in 2024, what is your crew size going to be? What are your budgets going to be? And what is the role that AI is going to play in making that film come to life?
Sure, yeah, well, I take more of a post-production slant to it. So again, Sora being really eye-opening, I think, as it relates to visual effects in particular, an area that I've been involved with for many years. The thought of paying thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars to create these visual effects, which is a very manual, labor-intensive process, is completely removed. And Sora it's just phenomenal. Like if I want to create a flying hippopotamus in outer space, that's going to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Absolutely. Just that one scene is going to be a couple of hundred of thousands of dollars. Absolutely. So is AI something that you as a film producer are actually actively looking at right now for subsequent projects which you're likely to produce?
Well, actually, I'm looking to develop it. So with our technology, LipDub, which is a lip syncing technology, it's my background as a film producer that has contributed to wanting to advance artificial intelligence as it relates to film and television.
Right. Okay. Professor Myral, let's bring you into this conversation. Shailesh Kumar there was talking about the social contract that AI has with population at large. With your experience at Stanford and your experience studying medicine in the context of AI, will future pandemics, hypothetically, be avoided because we will have information well in advance? Or is drug discovery, vaccine discovery going to hasten?
Great question. First of all, thank you so much for having me here. And I heard healthcare come up multiple times in the conversation here. That is one of the biggest use cases for AI, in my opinion. And the theme of the session is promise and peril, and healthcare exemplifies that really well. The examples that you provided, you just talked about, are absolutely good use cases, the promise part of AI. I'll add something else. India has 1.4 billion people. A substantial proportion of those people don't have yet meaningful access to healthcare, although India is trying to change that through Ayushman Bharat and Ayushman Bharat Digital Mission. But there are 5 billion people in the world, 5 billion people out of 8 billion people who do not have good access to healthcare. In this day and age, that's inconceivable. It's not something that we should be living with. And AI has the promise to flip the healthcare access on its head, turn it from tertiary care, highly qualified, hospitals like Stanford Hospital or Mayo Clinic or AIMS to local community-based healthcare delivery.
Give us an example, sir. I mean, a 35,000 feet view is appreciated, but if you come to eye level, how is life really going to get impacted for the person who is seeking medical intervention?
I'll give you a very specific example. During the second wave of COVID in India, lots of people were affected and a lot of people did die. And part of the problem was not that India did not have the ability to deal with the pandemic. It was a panic pandemic. People panicked. And a huge reason behind that was that primary care healthcare system over the decades has been disemboweled. If you could use AI to empower ASHA workers and A&M auxiliary nurse midwives in the last mile so that they can actually not only diagnose the condition that is happening on the ground, but also take meaningful action right there so that 80 to 90% of the patients don't end up in the ICUs, in the large institutions. It changes the cost equation, it changes the health outcome, it creates jobs. So if we're talking about jobs, it actually creates new kinds of high-value jobs. These ASHA workers are going to become the new, I don't want to say doctors, but healthcare providers, which is high value for the society and high value for these workers.
Right. Alok, thank you. You've been, with us waiting patiently. Before I come to you, I just want to go back to Shamik Roy. Shamik Roy, ASHA workers, last mile healthcare delivery workers enabled with AI. Is there a conflict of ethics here?
No, it's not. It depends on how you use AI. And whenever we talk of AI, we talk about ethical AI. In Microsoft, we call it responsible AI. And as we stand today, there are 6 principles around AI: transparency, fairness, inclusivity, accountability, privacy, security. As long as these principles are being adhered to, and you're using technology for ethics, fairness, and betterment of society and people, it should be fine.
Okay. Dr. Shailesh Kumar, again, the same question, slightly, rephrased. Should human beings rely on AI-enabled caregivers as a supplement to professional doctors?
Yeah, I think whenever we have seen AI touching any vertical, it has really accelerated the what we call personalization at scale.
Right.
And that is what really AI brings, whether it is education, healthcare, or... So we have built, for example, an AI bot that can diagnose your disease in all Indian languages for all the top 500 diseases in India. What does that do? Is it now brings a clinician to your home. You are a mother at 2 o'clock at night, your baby is having a certain symptom, there's no hospital nearby. AI can come to your rescue and say, hey, tell me the symptoms. Oh, you need an ambulance, I'm going to send an ambulance, right? Or you just need a home remedy, do this, and you're done. See, the level of comfort that people will have when the trust issues and others are resolved and, regulations are done, then, an AI doctor at every home, an AI tutor at every home, an AI legal advisor for everyone.
Right.
Just imagine the possibilities. And I think
the possibilities are endless, and I think it's an opportune time to bring in Mr. Alok into this conversation. Alok, none of this delivery of AI will actually happen without some physical interface in place. So bring to us your Samsung experience. What are the new technologies that we are going to see manifest in the form of physical tech that can be used to deliver any of these solutions which are being spoken about?
Yeah, good morning everyone, and thanks to TV9 team for having me here. I think we have seen India shining under the leadership of our Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi. And I think yesterday we talked about the soft power, and now we are here to discuss the power of AI. The AI has a tremendous power to analyze a large amount of data very quickly. And today, a large amount of networking and large amount of the instrumentation which happens in the industries are being controlled and monitored by the AI, which eventually is helping to save a lot of power and effectively improving the efficiency of these industries. When it comes to the human life, we are all wearing multiple gears in our body itself, right? Starting with the gear wear and the smartphones. We are always carrying these tech with us. A lot of data which these techs are actually utilizing has been helping us to understand our behavior, understand our physical activities, and giving recommendations for the human being to improve its wellness and help it to be fit. So that's how AI has been really tremendously empowering every person to have a better well-being as well as improving the social aspect of the society.
Right. So, Professor Myrdal, if I can come back to you, there is obviously reliance on a lot of data which is getting captured through all these wearable devices that Alok just spoke about. Is there a possibility of bias, AI hallucinations creeping in with hard data that you're receiving? And then that could mean something completely different for those who are at the receiving end of the healthcare solutions.
That's a great question. That's the peril part in the session. Most of the healthcare in the world is provided to people who have resources, and most of the data is with the wealthier part of the society. So if you create AI algorithms that are trained on data that already has a bias, then are you going to create healthcare solutions, women and children from underserved communities? Are you going to create AI solutions that are already going to have bias in sort of identifying diseases and treating diseases? I think this is where India can play a major role. What I mentioned, Ayushman Bharat Digital Mission. It's one of the most impressive, most ambitious infrastructure programs of its kind. You're basically getting data collection and use of that data to the remotest parts of India, and the data that you collect from that, especially if it's cleaned up, it's annotated correctly, it can serve to train engines that would eliminate that bias.
All right, okay. I want to spend, we are about halfway into our discussion already. I want to spend some time now on something which is absolutely critical to India right now, and that is India doesn't yet officially have an AI regulation in place. Now, there are two schools of thought here. There's a US side, which is pro-innovation, innovation, and there's the EU side, which is not seen as much pro-innovation. India has a tough job right now to find that right balance between innovation and regulation. Mr. Shailesh Kumar, if I can come to you, what is that fine balance that India needs to tread? And when does regulation become over-regulation at the cost of throttling innovation?
Yeah, see, I think there's a lot of ways to make sure that proper AI is practiced, right? Privacy preserved data coming out of all sources can be made available. If you know some random ID and my gene pool, that doesn't make it privacy violation, right? You can do all the research on it. So I think a very clear understanding on the boundaries, how to make sure that privacy, identity and behavior are separated to make sure that somebody who has your data doesn't know who you are, and somebody knows who you are doesn't have your data. If we make this very, very clear, this is a very simple way to make sure that, we can do a lot of innovation behind the unknown, user and create solutions for everyone, right? So I think it's not an ambiguous question. We know how to take care of it, right? And, still do great innovation. The place where the two things combine, that's where the danger is. So if I'm an AI tutor company and if I start selling the data of a child to the next employer, that's a boundary we are crossing, right? If I'm looking at your SMS data for financial scoring, but if I also misuse it for your healthcare purposes and sell that SMS to a healthcare provider, that's a disuse. So this is where, clear regulations have to be done. IPC laws have to come in very, very strong.
Right.
And that's when we will be comfortable that, we are all using AI.
Right.
For
A related question, since Reliance is also getting into data centers actively, so is hosting data centers within the confines of the country then going to aid this process of segregating data and creating that layer of anonymity?
Yes, I think, like any other physical resource, right? If you look at gold or nuclear or iron ore is a sovereign property, data is in that sovereign property world now. Everybody understands that. And yes, so I think having good data centers within India will make sure that, we are, even if Microsoft wants to do research on Indian data, they'll stay here and do it. And that will create the sovereignty boundaries that we need with all resources, most importantly, the data resources of the times.
All right, Shamik Roy, if I can bring you into this innovation versus regulation, which side are you tilting? And is there a versus in between, or does it have to be an and?
I like what you said, is there needs to be a balance between the two. If you put too much regulation, you will clamp in innovation. And that defeats the very purpose of the innovation itself. So there needs to be a fine balance. The good thing is that there are a couple of steps which the government is taking rightly. The DPDP bill is a very important one because it brings in a lot of regulations and the right regulations of privacy, security, safety around data. And as I said, the good thing about AI is when it's used ethically for the right purposes. And one of the 6 principles is privacy and safety, correct? The entire base of AI, and for AI to be successful, is data. And today we have got humongous amount of data. You talked about data centers. Microsoft has got 4 data centers which it has invested in and will invest in more. And we comply to each rule and regulations. So as long as there's rules and regulations are giving that area and the framework of security and the ethical use of AI, it's all good.
All right, Jonathan, let's bring you back into this very interesting conversation we are having. Since we are talking privacy and since we are talking hosting of data, there is also concern about misuse of privacy. And we've seen deep fake really rear its ugly head. Along with the rise of AI, there was also a rise of deep fake and unethical use of deep fake. You work in the film industry. It's a pertinent challenge there. As a producer, how are you overcoming that?
Yeah, I think it's a hugely important consideration, and the ethical use of AI is critical. Misrepresentation is the worst of it, and it can't be allowed. It needs to be banned, and people need to put in the regulations and the boundaries to enforce that. With a deep fake, the trick is, if you want to know if it's real or not, you tell the deep fake to look to the side, and that's what breaks it. So, you got to be very careful.
Okay, but in the contracts which you are perhaps increasing, right, if you're, sorry, I think there's some disturbance in my audio. Yeah, so I was coming to the question of deepfake. Now, in the context of deepfake, the contracts which you are now signing with actors, do they change? Does the legal language change, giving you as a film producer access to their images, access to their voice, access to their style, even beyond the longevity of the actor?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Are actors signing it willingly?
It's at the early days, but certainly it's being baked into contracts now. And in North America, there's union controls, so they're making sure that actors are taken care of. But ensuring that you're not misrepresenting someone or using their likeness in a way that is not authentic and in the spirit of what they stand for is a very big problem. But at the same time, it creates huge opportunities. So to this panel's point, AI can be used for very, very good things, so long as there's not malicious intent.
All right, Professor Meidel. There's also this excitement and concern, promise and pitfall, right? So there is excitement and concern about AI coupled with, let's say, 3D printing and organ transplants become that much more efficient, easier, cheaper, and perhaps leading to a point where human beings could perhaps become immortal. Is that still work of science fiction? Because a lot of science fiction that we are seeing or we have seen is actually turning into reality. So is human immortality still in the realm of distant fiction?
Very interesting question. I remember first when I moved to the Bay Area about 27 years back, I attended this Futures Institute talk where this thought leader said, we can live for 150 years today. This is 25 years back. And said we have the potential to live on up to 1,000 years with all of the technologies that are going to come in the next 2 years. And I've spent most of my career in health technology innovation, and I can tell you that's very much possible. But does it mean it's the same human being that lives on for that long? I don't know. I do want to come back to the innovation versus regulation question, if you don't mind. I think is a good way to think about it, but I would also add innovation in regulation is needed. Often what happens is regulators are always chasing the tail. They are so far behind in understanding where the arc of innovation is going that they tend to be a little regressive about how the frameworks come about. My recommendation would be to think about regulation as a framework, have common principles on which it's based, recognizing that AI is going to evolve constantly. We already are in a very different era. Just in 2 years, ChatGPT, when it first came out, I played with it, and ChatGPT today is very different from ChatGPT the first time that it came around. So I think as long as regulators understand that, they have a framework, and it's based on principles rather than very rigidly written rules, I think we would be okay.
Okay. I want to now take this conversation. We've got just about 5 minutes or so left. I want to pivot now to something which is very critical for India's own ascendancy in the world of artificial intelligence, and that being the whole GPU supported by semiconductors movement. We've got a gentleman from Samsung here, and we haven't seen any headlines of a large manufacturer like Samsung really taking part in the India semiconductor story. Is that something you're considering seriously?
Definitely. I think the GPU power is very essential for empowering the AI innovations. Currently, we see that globally there are monopolization of GPU resources, and there are few industries who are monopolizing the GPUs. I think it is necessary to put strict regulations so that we can have a fair competitions, and as well as the AI is accessible to all the members, right? Take an example of Indian universities. It is very difficult for Indian universities to access the infrastructure which is available to the West, right? By bringing all these industries along with the universities, giving those students the access to the high infrastructures of GPUs, we can actually leverage the student infrastructures and empower the AI innovations. So one of the great examples what we built in India is Bharat GPT, right? It came from the collaboration of industries as well as the universities coming together. So I think it is important for the government to take a precautionary actions as well as industries to join hands with those universities to empower the AI innovations.
Right. Since you mentioned Bharat GPT, Shailesh, let's come to the Hanuman in the room. Bharat GPT, an Indian AI model learned on 7 Indian languages, if I'm not mistaken, if I read the news correctly. Where does it go from here?
So I think we need to think of the, instead of large language models, small language models. So what we are looking at is, if you look at languages on one axis and domains on one axis, right? agriculture domain, healthcare domain, media domain. So domain, cross, language, small language models is, I think, the wave of the future.
Okay.
Instead of one gigantic model in
SLMs,
one
not
language,
LLMs.
Right? Yeah.
All right.
SLM at some point, right?
Right.
So small language model. That is one approach. And I think language models have reached their hype cycle, maybe a few more years. But I think there's a lot more that has to happen, right? And we got caught up in, statistics was AI, then machine learning was AI, then this is AI. Now we think Gen AI is AI and nothing else, right? I think reducing the notion of what AI is a very dangerous path. There's a lot more to it if you look at Jan LeCun and all.
Right.
Unless AI can invent by itself the next drug using reasoning and planning on all the knowledge of the world, without a prompt engineer doing any prompt engineering, we have not reached the ultimate potential of AI.
We
So
just have to
I
ensure
look
that the
forward
drug regulator is not using AI to give that drug a clearance.
Huh?
Will we have to ensure that the drug regulator is not using AI to give a clearance to that drug?
Yeah, see, the drugs manufacturing will be a lot faster and unhindered by the biases of capitalism.
Right.
And because AI does not have a moral compass, I think we can use it both ways. Let's hopefully use it in the right way.
Shamik Roy, I want to come back to you, and there's something that, and you said it beautifully, that what has Gen AI, ChatGPT done? It's given UI to AI, user interface to artificial intelligence. But slightly divergent from you, the next 10 years, a lot is going to change in AI. Where is it that you think India needs to proceed to maintain that hegemony that we've had in IT services? Is IT services, AI-supported IT services, India's game for the next 10 years? Or is it semiconductor manufacturing, sub-20 mm, 28 mm semiconductor fabs, which then go into GPUs, which can challenge, with the push on manufacturing, with the outlay on PLI and semiconductors, challenge the NVIDIAs and Huawei's of the world?
See, I'll talk about the ultimate objective. All of these are either supporting the infrastructure or the layouts to basically proliferate AI. What we should focus on is how do we make AI and democratize technology? Because AI is going to be in the core of technology anyways. We all are impacted by AI positively. We all are using AI, small or big, is about how we are embracing AI. I don't know if you noticed, let's say you're going and doing an SMS to your family members in the evening,
Auto-suggest.
correct?
Yeah.
And say, I am going to be, it says late. That's AI,
Yes,
correct?
true.
So what we should focus on is consumerization of AI, democratization of technology, because that will help to make the lives of every individual and every organization better, which indirectly helps the economy of the country and the world.
So you're saying concentrate still on the services, on the layers that you build on existing AI architectures. But what about semiconductors? Isn't that absolutely crucial to any AI factory out there? And should India try and take a lead in that as well?
All of these things will automatically happen. When you make great cars, great roads automatically come in. So these things will happen. You asked the question about GPU, you asked the question about local manufacturing. I think all of them will happen. But the end result should not be forgetting, which is getting AI in the hands of every person to make the economy better.
All right. Shailesh Kumar, cannot let you go before asking you another big, large fear which is emerging called AGI. Artificial General Intelligence, where is that going to take? And is it really potent enough to challenge human beings and their intelligence?
So, we are building towards it. Knowingly, unknowingly, we are building towards it, right?
What is it? Just demystify for us. How is AGI different from AI?
So, if you look at the 5 core elements of intelligence in my mind, the ability to learn, the ability to think, the ability to understand. Now we have crossed the 4th layer, the ability to generate or be creative. The 5th stage is what everybody is worried about, the ability to be sentient, consciousness, right? So I think in a way we have been building towards it, all the building blocks are there. Something that says, why do I need a human to do a prompt? I should be able to do it myself.
Yeah, but somebody has to think of that prompt, right? Who thinks? Does the machine think?
That's right. So if you think about the real general intelligence that we have, we are not driven just by intelligence, but also by goals. goals, short-term, long-term goals. Today, the goals that are given to AI are still by humans. Humans are telling what AI should do. And the moment AI decides to take away that freedom from us, that is what everybody is really worried about. And, we've seen science fiction movies, but, Jeff Hinton has now started a whole journey on, the dangers of AI and all that. So really the question is, do we want to get there versus when are we going to get there? I think we need to debate these two questions very carefully.
Shamik Roy, do we want to get there?
See, as you rightly said, that journey has happened, and it's a matter of time. And research says 5 years, 8 years, 10 years, we don't know when it will get there. But it will be the most powerful and intelligent computer which will be created, which will be able to do everything that human beings and animals is able to do today. And the thing is about how do we use it on a positive framework to do things much better and faster than we are able to do today. Can we actually, we talked about the pandemic, and it took 6 months to come out with that drug. But with that, can we actually predict that the pandemic will happen and able to come out with the drug in days rather than 6 months? And again, helping the society, helping the people to be better.
All right, gentlemen, we have run completely out of time on this exciting session, which has hopefully educated us on the promise, of course, but also the pitfalls of AI and how we as a nation and as a society need to navigate. Gentlemen, thank you so much. A pleasure having all of you here with us this morning on the News9 Global Summit. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. An esteemed set of panelists over there. Thank you so much, Karthik. You know what, Shweta, it's still too soon to say if Sora is going to be a sorted situation or a sorry situation.
I hope not, Kabir. I hope not. I think my understanding of the entire discussion is that it's going to take a while. You'll need more people trained on AI as opposed to AI taking away jobs. That, I think, would be the summing of this fabulous discussion panel on pitfalls of AI.
Among the many revolutionary changes in India over the past decade is its payments ecosystem as well, ladies and gentlemen. There are over, mind you, 2,000 UPI transactions being made every second today.
And I'm sure all of you are using that Paytm or using UPI in one form or the other. Digital India is no longer a distant dream, but pride of India and envy of others, leading the charge from the front in India's digital payment ecosystem is emerging Fintech story. India's Fintech players, 20 of whom have become unicorn in the past 10 years.
Wow. In fact, let's also tell the viewers that India ranks third among fintech unicorns in the world. But surprisingly, Shweta, 72% fewer Indian fintech startups were incorporated in 2023. So what's happening here?
You know, the regulatory and compliance ecosystem is fast changing, and fintech players are faced with a new working climate, so to say, which is either comply or perish. Take a look.
Banking has been credited with tech. Cash is no longer king. Checkbooks and passbooks have bounced, and bank visits are nearing expiry. A QR code and a smartphone have changed the way India transacts. UPI's global demand is only rising, and innovation with digital currency is gaining momentum. India's fintech glory is unparalleled, but even a single glitch can spell doom. With all its technology might, compliances and regulations are non-negotiable. Are India's fintechs ready to rise above the race for customer acquisition and valuations? Fintech 3.0, challenges and opportunities.
Right, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to call Chairman BharatPay and former Chairman SBI, Mr. Rajneesh Kumar, on to the stage. A very warm welcome, sir.
Let me also call upon TV9 Anshuman Tiwari to host this session.
Over to you, sir.
begin, I was recently reading this famous book of Richard S. Taylor, and he said a very interesting thing, which is, I think, probably connects with India's fintech story, is this: first, never underestimate the power of inertia, and second, the power can be harnessed. So you have been witnessed the inertia and revolution of Indian banking sector. You've been all the way through that, seeing the transformation of Indian banking industry from a manually labor-oriented industry to the digitally powered one. And before we begin this discussion on the fintech, would you like to FSI industry?
Yeah, so I joined the State Bank of India in 1980. Yeah. And the environment at that time was that every bookkeeping and every function was manual. And today, when you look back in 2024, it's a completely changed world. There was a time when balancing the books, that itself used to be a huge task. The customer's money, when you are collecting or remitting, it was a pain. You would never get interest on your deposits in time. So that was the scenario. And then gradually thereafter, I would consider 1984 as a watershed moment in the history of banking, when a bipartite settlement was signed with the unions which allowed computerization of the banks. At that time, there were not many private sector banks in the form what we see today. And to give you an example, that in 1984, I was working in HR department of State Bank of India, and we acquired an electronic typewriter, yes, which cost 75,000 rupees in 84. And then came PCXT, AT, and then the world has completely changed. And in this century, it is the advent of internet banking and mobile banking. Like any other service people consume, so banking is now mostly consumed through mobile banking and internet banking. So it has been a long journey. It has been helped by the fact that in 1991, the Indian economy and the banking system was unshackled. There was a rise of what we call new generation private sector banks, likes of ICICI Bank, HDFC Bank, UTI Bank, and now which is called Axis Bank. And that brought in competition, that brought in a new approach, that brought in adoption of technology in a big way. And it goes to the credit of the state-owned banks that they also adopted technology and have been able to compete in the market. Another I would consider to be a very, very important event in the history of banking and financial inclusion is August 2014, when our Honorable Prime Minister and he announced Jan Dhan Yojana. So the ingredients were there for that program to succeed. It's not that there were no financial inclusion initiatives in the past, but August 14 brought a paradigm shift, and when 35 crore accounts were opened, and that is supported by, again, technology. It is impossible to open and manage such a huge number of accounts, and that too in the remotest area of the country, unless it is supported by the technology. And of course, there was another important ingredient was the business correspondent model. So with this two and Jam Trinity, and that is what has done wonders for the banking system in India. Payment system, again, like I'm sure you will be asking the question. So I will cover there, but this is the opening remark that how in this 40 years, the face of Indian banking has completely changed, and it is amongst one of the best in the world today.
Sir, definitely Indian banking and finance industry has seen a metamorphosis in just one decade, the way you have seen it going. But cash still remains the king. And with your experience in the traditional banking and now the new fintech banking, which is called neo-banking, how long do you think that cash will remain in the dominance, considering the rise of digital transactions?
One is that as far as cash is concerned, it is the easiest way of doing transactions. It cannot be denied. And there is an explosion as far as the digital transactions are concerned, and particularly for a small value. And cash in circulation in the economy after demonetization, as percentage of GDP, it has come down by about half percentage point. But it's still the convenience of cash. We will try to replace, but it is not happening.
But sir, here comes a puzzle that despite the concurrent rise in digital transactions and explosion of currency in circulation, this infusion of money into the system has not seamlessly translated into the consumer demand of demand in the GDP. And can you unravel this whole mystery about us? Because we have got enough money available in the market system, both in the digital and the cash, but the GDP growth is not reflecting that supply of money.
No, I think we are growing decently as far as GDP is concerned, and particularly in nominal terms. The GDP growth is around 13 to 14%. And for GDP, there are so many things. It can be consumption-led. It can be infrastructure-led. So in our country, what is happening that I agree that consumption has not grown as much. But on the other side, the investment in infrastructure, which has increased at least almost, I think, fourfold. Now the central government budget alone is about 11 trillion rupees or 11 lakh crore rupees. And infrastructure, we know, it has huge multiplier effect. So to say that GDP has not grown, I won't agree with that statement. I think we are doing quite a decent job considering the overall global geopolitical scenario. And India is today considered to be the only shining example as far as GDP growth is concerned. The disposable income, you may say, or the consumption, I think even today there is some analysis which has appeared in the newspapers that the gap between the rural and urban consumption, yes, it is coming down. So it's happening, but of course, the elements which are driving the growth and the productivity of our economy, they're a bit different.
So now I come to the difficult part of the fintech industry. Suddenly, from a success story, fintech has emerging as one of the primary risks for the core banking industry. There are a lot of vulnerabilities has been come off late. RBI has started tightening the screw of regulations. As part of your old regime, you are part of the old core banking, and now you are leading a fintech revolution. What are the core vulnerabilities you think that the digital transaction and entire fintech space has that? And have regulators failed to anticipate these inherent risk of connected banking, which is now started creating a lot of problems across the banking universe?
No, as far as connected banking is concerned, I mean, that is something you can't wish away. It will remain. We live in a connected world, whether it is banking or whatever services you consume today, you do it through a connected world, whether it is your personal transport need, whether it is your health. So you take any example and you can't live without a mobile today. That is the reality. And about the risks, whenever something new happens, new technology happens, even the previous sessions there was a discussion. So whenever something new happens, it brings in certain positives and it brings risks. So today in the connected world, the huge risk around cybersecurity, the huge risk around data protection, frauds, cyber frauds, all those risks are there. But one thing which has come out very clearly is that if anyone is part of a highly regulated ecosystem, then even if a fintech is not directly regulated, but they work closely with the regulated entities. And regulated entities, we know from experience, I have chaired the State Bank for 3 years, I was its managing director, risk and compliance. Regulation is a different ball. To the credit of the young entrepreneurs, they have brought in a lot of innovation for the benefit of what we call financially excluded. So fintechs have played, and I'm talking more on the payment and lending side and investment side. They have done a wonderful job. But there is a certain responsibility cast on the regulators. You would have heard of FATF.
Yes.
Nobody would like India to be in that grey list, you know. And then you have to regulate the system. I think three primary things, apart from many, many functions which a central bank or regulator does is, one is that there should not be a systematic risk developing. Second is consumer disclosures and protection. That is a must. And the rules around what we call KYC and anti-money laundering. So if anyone for that matter fiddles around that.
But how do you view this crackdown on Paytm? Some argue in the fintech industry that regulators are getting over stringent on that, and this is in a way stifling the growth of a startup and a sort of fledgling industry which is coming up.
I really don't know what is the inside story. Whatever you know, I know that is all what we have read in the newspapers or seen on the television. But the fact of the matter is, as I said, that having an experience of dealing with the regulators in a very big way, I think there is always a chance given for course correction. Nobody is perfect. If you look at the entire banking or financial system, there will be somewhere some weaknesses. There are periodically audits, reports, inspections by Reserve Bank of India. There is always a chance given to do the course correction. That is I'm talking about from my personal experience, and then your intent to do the course correction. Many times, State Bank is such a huge bank. So every task is huge. So sometimes there would be timelines. You may not be able to meet those timelines. But then, honestly, if you go to the regulator and tell that difficulties, I don't think they are unreasonable people. So, I mean, that is my take on this. And what happened in Paytm's case, I have not seen the report, you have not seen the report. So whatever Reserve Bank tells us, or whatever media tries to dig out, so we just go on that presumption. But it seems to be a case where prima facie, on my experience, I can say that regulators must have felt that they are not being taken seriously. That's the only conclusion I can draw.
Let's move to the other challenge of the fintech industry. I was going through the recent IMF report, and it says that the fintech adoption across the world, especially in the third world, is in the low income groups, and they are digitally exposed with all the privacies to the cyber hackers. And the report says that 30% of their savings actually been taken away by cyber hackers every year. How do you think that how the current fintech industry is prepared to protect their vulnerabilities and their exposure to that?
Yeah, as I said, that banking is always a risky business, and more so the payments. And in my opening remark also, I said that cyber security and data privacy and data security, these are the two biggest challenges. Time to time, the banking system, the payment system, we keep on strengthening. And we have to also realize that the people who you call cyber thieves or the dark side of net, they are equally smart people. So it is a typical like police and chore game or whatever you call it. So that is going on, and you take one step and then you find they are sometimes ahead of you. So this battle and this struggle, I think that will continue to go on. But again, the laws, the regulation and the compliance and ability to foresee the risks and not take things lightly. The compliance culture that needs, some sort of a zero tolerance when it comes to compliance and your security of your systems.
So we have finally come to the end of the session. Just one last five second. Anything big you are going to tell about the Bharat Pay is going to do in coming weeks, coming months?
No, BharatPay is it is a B2B in the sense that we are into merchant acquisition, and we have taken a more balanced approach when we do the customer acquisition. There was a time when it was all numbers around growth, TPV, GMV and whatnot. But from for last 2-3 years when I took charge, we have done some course correction. We are doing business in a very solid manner and in a very compliant manner. We are not a directly regulated entity, but we realize that we are working in that system which is highly regulated. It is a principal and agent relationship. So what are the obligations cast on the principal, which is a NBFC or a bank? So we take it very seriously, and in a very systematic manner we are developing our business. We are building a sustainable business. It is not that we want to just for the sake of valuation purpose do something silly.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kumar, for joining us for this special session. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anshuman, Rajneesh, sir, for taking time out and for joining us.
Thank you so
for
much.
Those words of wisdom.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. All right, ladies and gentlemen, time for a quick segue here because we have an important dignitary in our midst, and it's the right time to be talking about this because women empowerment is the cornerstone of the Modi government and one of its key constituencies, even as India heads into the general elections.
In fact, among the very little that did come out of the interim budget presented by Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, one theme that stood out was that to further promote Lakpati Didis.
Nari Shakti, ladies and gentlemen. That's the theme for Viksit Bharat to become a reality. Let's take a quick look.
For India to become a developed nation, gender inequality must end. The narrative must change from women empowerment as a slogan of equality to women achievement as a symbol of progress. For a nation in the race to the top, women need to get in the driver's seat. As an epitome of women in leadership, her role in inspiring women across generations has been pivotal. As Union Minister for Women and Child Development and Minority Affairs, she continues to push the boundaries to make Indian women boundless. Nari Shakti, driving Mission Viksit Bharat with Union Minister Smriti Irani.
And let's come together to celebrate and amplify the force of Nari Shakti. Please welcome on stage Minister for Women, Child Development and Minority Affairs, Smriti Irani.
Women are indeed reaching commanding heights, ladies and gentlemen, just like the Border Roads Organization's all-woman squad at India's highest post, higher than the Everest Base Camp. The BRTF 755 is situated at Hanle at an altitude of 15,000 feet. This 5-officer unit, led by Combat Engineer Colonel Ponung Doming, is the world's first all-women team to be deployed at an extremely high altitude.
And the team of engineers led by Colonel Doming is supervising road construction along the line of actual control with China in the sensitive and strategically important Eastern Ladakh sector. The road is helping us guard our borders better and realize the growing aspirations of India. Kyunki banega to badega India.
Without further ado, TV9 Networks and Nishant and Neha are already there. Over to you.
सबसे पहले तो मैं चाहूंगा जोरदार तालियों से स्मृति जी का स्वागत करें. हमारे लिए समय निकाला आपने. बहुत बहुत स्वागत है मैम. थैंक यू वेरी मच. नेहा.
Well, this is a guest who needs absolutely no introduction. She is an icon in this country. Union Minister for Women and Child Development and Minority Affairs, and if I may add, the giant killer of 2019. Okay. Let me ask the Minister this question. Since we are discussing today Nari Shakti and driving Mission Viksit Bharat, you know, the Prime Minister is a major votary of Nari Shakti and it's very close to your heart as well. He took a very progressive step of inducting, correct me if I'm wrong, 11 women in his Council of Ministers. One of them is in the highly coveted Cabinet Committee on Security. But unfortunately, we do not see this level of women's participation at the state level. You will agree that if India has to take the next giant global leap, we need to unlock women's power. How do we do that?
I think you do a great disservice to women when you presume that power is only if you're in a constitutional position. India has made an economic and a political case for why women need to be shoulder to shoulder with men or any other gender. The topic of conversation on your platform is what India thinks today. In fact, what India does today, the world does tomorrow. And what India has done significantly for gender is make a case for women who are emancipated across all walks of life. So if you presume that Prime Minister Modi's gender agenda or female agenda is only limited to how many colleagues he can have in the Council of Ministers, you do disservice to his entire effort, not only as Prime Minister, but his entire life's journey as an administrator. Now, I've had the greatest of privileges to see him function as the Chief Minister of Gujarat and as the Prime Minister of India. What did he do in Gujarat, which now finds resonance across India? He's one of the first people in the office of Chief Minister who ensured that there is a digital interface with citizens across all districts. He then ensured that there was a digital interface where medical infrastructure in a district, along with medical infrastructure right up to the level of panchayat, combined efforts to look after women and children, and especially their health. There was something called e-Mamta, which he did as the Chief Minister of Gujarat, where from the day a woman registers herself to give birth, to ensuring that she is encouraged to deliver the child in a medical institution and not birth at home. That is something he started 2 decades ago. Now, what happens when you encourage pregnant women to deliver in a medical institution? You curb the death of the mother at childbirth and the death of the child if the child is born with some medical complications. Now, many people presume that Prime Minister Modi at the national front is now doing projects like Pradhan Mantri Matra Vandana Yojana, wherein 3.5 crore women have had cash transfers into their bank accounts up to the level of 6,000 rupees, only so that the day they take leave to go and see a doctor is compensated. Now imagine the detail to which he went, so that if women who are economically active want to look after their health, they should be compensated and institutional delivery should be promoted even at the national level. So what he did in the state today finds national success. Now, why am I giving this context, Neha? What happens? Who gets counted? The world over, only women in institutional leadership positions get counted, as though only their success matters. What Prime Minister Modi has done is ensure women at every walk of life, in every platform, are counted. Now, when he was Chief Minister of Gujarat, he started something called Mission Mangalam, where he ensured that self-help groups in Gujarat had a business plan, had institutional credit, and serviced that credit so that their capacity financially could grow. Today, when I see that out of 90 million self-help groups, you have women in those self-help groups who receive nothing less than 8 lakh crore rupees from the government of India. But if you compute their economic value in the Indian ecosystem of economy, you will see that they do business worth $37 billion every year. Shouldn't those women count? So when Prime Minister Modi says that these 90 million women in self-help groups matter, there are many who have still not done the math of the rural economy impact that these women have. Now imagine this, for the first time we have a Prime Minister who says that these women have capacity to become Lakhpatis. The nomenclature itself is not gendered. It favors a man. It's a Lakhpati. So he talks about financial ambition. Women were always spoken about from an aspirational and emancipation point of view, as though they are waiting to be rescued. What Prime Minister Modi has done is make them equal partners in your economy. So I know that people who introduced this segment spoke about a lady who is leading road building efforts in the Indian Armed Forces at the line of actual control. But you also have not heard the story of, for the first time, Prime Minister Modi ensuring that the Labour Code allows companies to hire women for underground mining. So those are the stories that need to be told, because these women at leadership positions in underground mining, in space technology, matter. So yes, what the women in the Council of Ministers is just a political reflection, but the reality of what Prime Minister Modi has managed to do at the grassroots is enormous, and that's why I'm hopeful that what Prime Minister Modi in India has done today, the world should do tomorrow. And I say this because we have created that platform even during India's presidency at the G20. I'm sorry I'm taking so long, but I wanted to give context.
आप जो बता रही हैं इस बात से हम पूरी तरह सहमत हैं। कल ही प्रधानमंत्री जी ने मन की बात में वो बताया था किस तरीके से गांव के ग्रासरूट लेवल पर महिलाओं को ड्रोन उड़ाना सिखाया गया, और वो ड्रोन दीदी का जो कॉन्सेप्ट है वो अपने आप में एक शायद दुनिया आगे जाके करेगी जिसका जिक्र आप कर रही हैं। मैम, आप पिछले महीने मदीना होकर आई और आपकी सरकार में एक सबसे अनप्रेसिडेंटेड चीज़ें ये हुई कि महिलाएं अकेले जाने लग गईं और उनकी संख्या भी 4000 के ऊपर। अब जो देखने वाली बात है, जब आप ऐसी जगह जाती हैं जहां पर अभी भी बहुत पाबंदियां हैं, वहां पर भारत का ये जो रिसर्जेंस है इसको कैसे देखा जाता है?
देखिए, मेरा मदीना में या फिर हज की तैयारियां कैसे हो इसके संदर्भ में उस देश में जाना, प्रधानमंत्री मोदी की स्वीकार्यता जो इस्लामिक नेशंस में है उसका सबसे बड़ा एक मुझे लगता है प्रतिबिंब है। ये सत्य है कि महिला बिना महरम के अब जा सकती हैं हज के लिए। वो इसलिए भी क्योंकि धर्म में ये अनुमति थी, धर्म में ये पाबंदी नहीं थी। और प्रधानमंत्री मोदी जी ने जब इस निर्णय को करा तब उन्हें ये ज्ञात था कि जब धर्म पाबंदी नहीं देता तो प्रशासन क्यों पाबंदी और रोड़ा बने। उन्होंने व्यवस्थाएं कुछ ऐसी की। ये 4000 महिलाओं का जाना अपने आप में अद्भुत क्यों है? क्योंकि व्यवस्थाएं बन जाती हैं, लेकिन व्यवस्थाओं का इस्तेमाल जब तक विश्वास ना हो तब तक नहीं किया जाता। तो ये 4300 महिलाएं थी जो अकेले हज के लिए गईं। उनका वहाँ जाना इस विश्वास को भी दर्शाता है कि आज हिंदुस्तानी चाहे विश्व के किसी भी कोने में क्यों ना हो, वो जानता है कि अगर मुसीबत सरहद पार भी आई तो मोदी है तो मुमकिन है तुम घर लौटोगे ही लौटोगे।
Very powerful indeed, and there is no doubt, ma'am, that the government has taken very many progressive measures with regard to women, whether it is 6 months maternity leave or even passing of the women's reservation bill that happened recently. But may I ask you a personal question? Because at the start I said you are an icon, a role model for many around this country. Your personal journey has been marked by multiple milestones and firsts. You made a very successful transition from entertainment to politics. I think it would be safe to assume that there would have been many challenges along the way. Since we are talking about Nari Shakti, and frankly, you are an embodiment of that, I want to ask you, how did you manage to smash the proverbial glass ceiling and storm those male bastions?
So firstly, the very idea of a glass ceiling is an American one. It is not a global south concept at all. And I say this vehemently for 2-3 issues. When the US had this whole feminist movement and spoke about the glass ceiling that needs to be broken, if you look at it anthropologically and from a perspective of social science, India had already had milestones with regards to women and their status in society. Point in case, if you're somebody who's a fiend for research, pick up the Arthashastra. Now in India, we passed the Prevention of Sexual Harassment at Workplace Bill in the year 2013. But the Arthashastra that was written thousands of years ago, in fact, has a documented evidence of what the administrator or the rulers should do if a woman at work is harassed, and especially by a public official. The challenge is that you never highlighted these aspects because these aspects never found political value. And that is when Prime Minister Modi speaks about Vikas and Virasat, that these issues become central. You have in your channel somebody who's very erudite and again, somebody who can give you a historical context of what Bharat is. Mr. Hemant Sharma is there sitting right on the front seat. He can explain to you, Chandragupta Maurya, his army had women fighting. You are the only nation that can historically evidence that in your fight for independence, you had a female ruler called Lakshmi Bai who went to war on a horse, tied her child to her back and raised arms against the British. Can you find any woman in battle with her baby tied to her back in any other war of independence anywhere in the world? You won't find it. So when Prime Minister Modi says Virasat bhi Vikas bhi, that is the one aspect I'd like to highlight. The second thing is that we do a great disservice to women when we keep them confined only to issues of women. We never ask men, what are you doing for men? And you're the embodiment of everything a man should be. We try and put the woman on that pedestal and say, oh, you are great and you are the inspiration. Why do we never have conversations about men being inspirations for other men as though we are supposed to carry the burden only of our gender? So the only way that you can complement women and their capacities is to ensure that you go beyond the pedestal talk and engage them on issues of why, I still remember budget day and every woman would be asked, "Aapka kitchen kaise impact hua hai?" As though the budget for defense doesn't matter for her. As though the infrastructural output of the government and outcomes does not matter to her. So this is the government that has ensured that even when you look at gender budgeting across the government's outlays, we have seen an increment of 239% in how the government spends money across all sectors, including infrastructure, and then also computes in it the value for women. So I think we have to now shift the conversation. And that's why I think one of the most tectonic shifts in narrative is when Prime Minister says we need to now talk about women-led development. Yes. Because for too long we've been saying, Mahilaon ka vikas kar do, as though, I'm waiting for a handout. Yeah. So what Prime Minister Modi has done is say that if you want to develop as a nation, you can't afford to leave the women behind. Yeah. That is a much better conversation.
May I ask you a follow-up question? Actually, I'm really glad you talk about how the issue of women's empowerment, women's rights should not be confined to just women. And I'm reminded of what Prime Minister Narendra Modi said a few years ago in his Independence Day speech. लड़कियों को बहुत समझा लिया, लड़कियों को बहुत लेक्चर दे दिया, कहाँ जाती हो, कितने बजे घर आती हो. It is time you taught your boys how to behave with women and girls. It's time you asked them questions.
See, Neha, I don't think that beating up men ensures gender justice. I'm of the opinion that when we talk about...
But I'm saying this in the context of women's safety.
No, the issue is that when there is domestic violence, there has to be somebody in the family who's a woman who knows that the lady is getting beaten up. So like I said, if you paint and taint every man as though they are the people we need to deal with, you will not create the social balance that we need. For instance, and why do I say this? Today, try and pass a legislation for reproductive rights of women in Europe and in the United States of America. You will get a pushback from polity and from people other than polity who presumably fill the intellectual space. In India since 1960s, there has been a conversation about medical termination of pregnancy at 24 weeks. There have been those cases that the media has highlighted in the Supreme Court of India, where women have had to go to court saying, if I give birth to this baby, either the baby dies or I die. Court saying, if I give birth to this baby, either the baby dies or I die. But there was no legislation. What Prime Minister Modi did was bring a legislation for medical termination of pregnancy at 24 weeks, passed it in both houses of parliament, and not a single Indian man spoke up against it. So the idea is, we've had a female Prime Minister before, But it is Prime Minister Modi who created the first ever menstrual hygiene protocol for administration to follow. And that is why I say that when you talk about the issues of women, don't discount the men. They are not the enemy.
मैम, ये सवाल यहाँ पर जितने भी लोग बैठे हैं उन सबके मन में होगा। स्मृति ईरानी जी की नारी शक्ति क्या है? आप घर भी मैनेज करती हैं, पार्टी का काम भी करती हैं, सरकार का भी काम
घर कैसे मैनेज करते हैं?
मैं वाकई में मैनेज नहीं करता हूँ. I really don't manage. It's my mom who does it.
The men never get asked this question, right?
Precisely.
I'm asking you, how do you, the multifaceted Smriti Irani.
Rajneesh was on the panel before me. Were you asked, how do you manage your home?
No, I'm saying, how do you manage so many things?
No. So, was he asked, how does he manage his home?
Sorry, Nishant, but I'm with her on this one.
Never mind.
No, even Rajneesh is with me on this one. Because he was asked questions purely on Fintech. I wonder when will you ask me those questions?
Okay, I'm going to ask you a few.
So the issue is that, now Nishant, why did I pick on this? And why did I say men are not the enemy? It is the psychology which is a challenge. The presumption for too long has been that men who are not educated, men who do not know better, men who do not have exposure to literature or to news or to intelligentsia will have an inherent bias against women. We need to recognize that there is an uncalled for but unrecognized bias that we all fight. And that seeps into conversation. And why do I not answer this question is I don't want to precipitate the bias. So if you start asking every man here, who looks after your baby? I will tell you who looks after mine.
मैम, एक विषय है जो अभी एक डेटा आया SBI का, उसमें लिखा कि अनपेड केयर, जिसको हम होम मेकर्स की भी बात करते हैं, वो भारत की इकोनॉमी में करीब 22 लाख करोड़ रुपए उसका मिनिमम अगर कंट्रीब्यूशन कहा जाए.
Again,
मैं आपसे समझना चाहूंगा, what is your take on it?
मैं भी समझना चाह रही हूँ कि which part of that house relationship is to be monetized. For instance, when you say that the work of a mother is unpaid for, the work of a wife is unpaid for. So if I am tough on my kids, and we have guests who are internationally, I think today, here amongst us, and that is why I use a vegetable which they may possibly recognize in a conversation. If my kid doesn't want to have broccoli, and I want that kid to have broccoli, does that make me a bad mother and I get paid less? How do you quantify carrying a child for 9 months, looking after that child when the child is not able to walk, talk, feed itself? How do you compensate for bones that are broken just because of childbirth? Is there any economist in the world that can compute that cost to me? Secondly, as a wife, today, if I do not do what my husband desires, am I to be computed monetarily less? So, if you start monetizing relationships, then do you reduce women to just that token that is a service component in your life? And that is what nobody has been able to explain to me. What does a female somebody who just runs a family, as you normally say, what does just running a family mean? How do you compute it? And is my love for my child and my husband for sale? No, it's not. So when we talk about unpaid work for women at home, what do you mean? Nobody's been able to explain it yet. If you talk about women who work in, let's say, their own field for agriculture purposes, then you want to compute what her takeaway may have been if she was a day labor. Would you do the same for the man? So that is why it sounds very fanciful, because everybody in the global north has been trying to do it. But the issue is that what is the crux of our systems in families? It is mutual trust, it is mutual respect. can you respect somebody that you need to pay to love and care?
Very well said, ma'am. Very well said.
And perhaps it's a problem of mindset more than anything else. The terms housewife, homemaker are often used, I think, in a derogatory fashion,
There's
not
nothing,
according the
no,
respect
I
that
don't
women
think,
deserve for the work
firstly,
they do.
I don't think women give a damn about whether you call them a housemaker or some ambitious lady. Women are not driven by those schisms. I genuinely believe that when you try to contextualize such conversation from an economic point of view, you better have something which is a solid economic perspective for policymakers to opine on. The development sector, which is your NGO ecosystem, works on a lot of contexts. But ultimately, for policymakers to make life easier for people, what do you need to do? I'll give you one example. Ayushman Bharat started. Right? 10 crore families, 300 million Ayushman Bharat cards given out to citizens. How has it helped women? Now, cancer of the breast is something that not many people in our country spoke about openly. But there was a presumption that this is culturally not permissible as a topic of conversation. If you look at the numbers in Ayushman Bharat, women have personally gotten themselves screened for cancer of the breast and the cervix. 24 crore women. What does that mean? That they knew what the problem was, they knew where to get the help from, all they lacked was the resources. So who are these 24 crore women, the 240 million women who are landing up in medical institutions? So it was not a problem of the mindset ever. Who are these women? They are not from the elite. They are not from the educated Tier 1 cities. These are women who are the poorest of the poor. These are women who also belong to villages. They walked up to a medical institution and said, this is my card. I need to get myself screened for breast cancer and cancer of the cervix. That's a huge cultural, I think, takeaway from Ayushman Bharat.
Yeah.
But if you look at numbers financially, and Rajneesh is better at all this than I am, but if you look at the numbers financially, Prime Minister Modi in the past 10 years has taken out 25 crore Indians, 250 million, if I'm right, out of multidimensional poverty. Now, health and the cost of health and out-of-pocket expenses, 130 million people are out of poverty because their health needs were covered by the Prime Minister's flagship scheme. So it is not now only about how do you service women. It is what is the overall budgetary impact on your system? What is the over social impact on your system? And why am I saying this? No other country in the world is running such a complex and such a large medical ecosystem. We are running it. Obamacare ran in a limited fashion, but it did not run in a country of 1.4 billion people. Ayushman is running in a country of 1.4 billion.
Right.
Another issue, your food grains to the doorstep of 800 million citizens for 2.5 years, that is an administrative miracle which is not happening anywhere in the world.
Given our numbers, most
without
certainly.
disruption.
Yeah.
So that is why I said, what India does today, the world does tomorrow.
World does tomorrow. But since we're talking about health, I think we need to touch on education as well. Very quickly, two-pronged question for you. Number one, we still have a huge challenge of a high dropout rate amongst girls in schools. Perhaps more needs to be done. Sorry?
What are the numbers?
Okay, I don't have the data handy right now, but it continues to be a
Because I
challenge.
do, that's why I know that the numbers are curtailed and they've not gone up.
They've not gone up. But you'll agree it's a challenge. What more do we need to address it?
None of these challenges are topical to India. Two, the numbers of dropouts has decreased. In fact, when Prime Minister Modi took over in 2014, we recognized, and I had the privilege of being Minister Education then, we created the first ever national education policy by going to 2 lakh village education councils, by going to every district, every university, every school parent-teacher organization, by leveraging MyGov, by talking to not only state governments, but every other education minister who has ever served in the history of India, who was alive and who wanted to contribute. Every political organization and international partners like UN Women, UNICEF, UNDP. That being said, One of the challenges, especially for women in higher education, today we have close to 263 million kids in K-12. We have around 36 to 38 million kids in higher education. What happens to women who used to not transition from grade 12 onwards to higher education? One of the biggest challenges was that they were not doing, say, things like PhD because they were moving cities either after marriage or for a job. The minute credits were made, given national movement, academic credits, that is when the numbers now of women who are doing PhDs in India has gone up by 99%. 43% of all STEM graduates in India are women. And Prime Minister Modi realized that one of the greatest challenges with regards to dropout is that when the girl enters the menstrual cycle age, they used to drop out for those issues because they didn't have access to toilets. So in the first year of him being Prime Minister, he built 400,000 toilets, marked and mapped. I was there because we did it, so I can say this with satisfaction. Mapped every toilet which was not available in every government school in collaboration with states. I think that's one of the greatest examples of cooperative federalism because not one state backed out. So we know that at every level of engagement, and that is when Prime Minister Modi had the education policy come out, for the first time in the history of independent India, it has a gender inclusion fund that helps fund infrastructure only for education of women and young girls.
मैम, इस शो को वाइंड अप करने से पहले आपसे एक सवाल पॉलिटिकल में ज़रूर पूछना चाहूँगा. एक तरफ हम लोग ये बात कर रहे हैं और दूसरी तरफ एक संदेश खाली जैसी घटना होती है जहां पर कार्रवाई भी नहीं हो रही है और चीजों को छुपाया जा रहा है. उस पर आपका टेक क्या है मैम?
यहाँ पे क्योंकि आपके अंतर्राष्ट्रीय बहुत सारे मेहमान बैठे हैं, मैं उनके सामने अपने देश के आंतरिक विषयों के ऊपर जो तीखापन आप मेरे लहजे में नॉर्मली देखते हैं, I'm very mindful of our international guests, and that is why I want to just say this. वहाँ जो हुआ, और मैं जानबूझकर हिंदी में ही कहूँगी, वहाँ जो हुआ वो भारतीय तो क्या किसी भी इंसान की सोच के परे है. मैंने ये पश्चिम बंगाल में जब हिंसा हुई थी चुनाव के बाद तब कहा था कि शायद मीडिया में भी इस प्रकार का एहसास है कि अगर भाजपाई है तो उसे मौत के घाट आसानी से उतारा जा सकता है. अगर भाजपा की महिला कार्यकर्ता है उसको उसके घर से उठाकर सामूहिक बलात्कार किया जा सकता है. अगर भाजपा का युवा मोर्चा का कोई कार्यकर्ता है तो उसे गांव में खुले खेत में पेड़ से रस्सी से टांग कर मारा जा सकता है. अगर भाजपा का कोई वरिष्ठ कार्यकर्ता है तो उसके घर को आग लगाई जा सकती है. एज दो चूंकि हम भाजपा से हैं इसलिए पश्चिम बंगाल में हमें कोई मौत के घाट उतार दे तो किसी को कोई फ़र्क नहीं पड़ना चाहिए, क्योंकि ये हमारी पॉलिटिकल कॉस्ट है जो हम देते हैं लड़ने के लिए. संदेश खाली में वो हैं जो भाजपाई नहीं हैं. दे केम फॉर अस फर्स्ट, दे आर कमिंग फॉर देयर ओन नाउ. आप सोच सकते हैं कि जिन लोगों ने ममता जी को वर्षों वर्ष तक सहयोग दिया, सहायता दी, उन औरतों को घरों से उठा कर बलात्कार किया जाता है. क्या ये कोई सोच सकता था कि ममता बंदोपाध्याय को पता ही नहीं है कि हाउस टू हाउस औरतों को उनकी उम्र, उनके धर्म के आधार पर चिन्हित करके उठाया जा रहा था. और इसलिए मैंने कहा दे केम फॉर अस फर्स्ट, दे आर कमिंग फॉर यू नाउ. और निशान जी, स्तब्ध करने वाली बात यह है, राजनीति अपनी तरफ, कांग्रेस के कार्यकर्ताओं की भी हत्या हुई. कांग्रेस के लोग भी वहाँ जाकर बात करना चाहते हैं, लेकिन वो शहजादे जो अभी भी राजनीति के भूल भुलैया में खुद को खोज रहे हैं, उनके पास इस विषय के लिए एक शब्द नहीं है.
Okay, ma'am, I know this is a very, very serious subject, but since we're
I'm
running out
not
of...
deliberately speaking on this subject in English because we have international guests, and I'm very mindful that in front of international guests, I will not talk about domestic political agendas.
We appreciate that. But can I just ask you a question in a lighter vein, since we are wrapping up this conversation?
Sure.
You recently posted a picture of your father with the Prime Minister, and the caption read, "When the boss meets the father and you pray, they don't exchange complaints about you. Parent-teacher meeting चल रही है." तो मैं आपसे ये पूछना चाहती हूँ कि वो पेरेंट-टीचर मीटिंग कैसी रही? टीचर ने पेरेंट को रिपोर्ट कार्ड कैसी दी?
My father is habituated to me getting him in trouble. I still remember as a kid, between my parents, they used to do a coin toss to say, "Aaj Smriti ki report card lene kaun jayega?" I think this is the first time that my father was happy to be in attendance to meet with my teacher. The fact that you can even be a student in Prime Minister Modi's class is a great privilege, Neha. I'm 47 years of age, and I have lived to witness history and a legend at work myself. I have witnessed a man standing there in Parliament ensuring Article 370 is revoked. I have witnessed 33% reservation for women passed in both houses of Parliament. I have witnessed Ram Lalla Virajman. I've been a part of history, and I've been with a legend who has made history. What more? Even if the fact pass है कि fail है नहीं पता, report card पे मोदी का sign है, वही उस report card को अमूल्य बना.
We are sure it's an A grade. We are pretty sure of that. Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause for the one and only Miss Smriti Irani.
Thank you for the conversation.
Thank you, ma'am. It's been lovely talking to you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much, Neha and Nishant, for conducting that riveting session nonetheless. Ladies and gentlemen, please don't keep the applause coming. Union Minister Srimati Smriti Irani.
Ma'am, thank you very much for talking about your report card. We sure as do hope that it's an A+. But with that, we will, of course, wind this session up. Union Minister Smriti Irani.
Well, all right. Let's get moving and cracking, ladies and gentlemen.
As we witness a shift in India's economic landscape, the conversation around innovation and entrepreneurship takes the center stage. Now, India wants to become a country of job creators rather than job seekers.
That's right. With over 92,000 government-recognized startups under the flagship Startup India initiative, it's time now to set sights on the global startup stage. India's aspiration is to build locally, but expand globally. With startups leading the charge, that's our next session, ladies and gentlemen. Take a look.
Beating COVID-19, Indian startups made history. Billion-dollar valuations became business as usual. But then came a chilling funding winter, freezing startups right to their bones, and corporate misgovernance cast a shadow on India's startup story. But the vibrant startup ecosystem has not lost its sheen. Profitability is now in currency, and valuation not a password. India needs to sustain its momentum and scale up beyond borders. Let's write the new handbook of entrepreneurship. Startup India. Scale up and sustain.
Well, let's now delve deeper into India's ambitious startup vision and explore the opportunities and challenges it presents to us today. I'd like to first invite arguably India's foremost startup success story that has helped India solve its most significant challenge back in the day, resulting in India's transcending from being a milk deficit to a milk surplus country. Moreover, this is one of the organizations that has truly lived up to its social contract of community empowerment and financial independence like no other corporation has. It gives me immense pleasure in calling on stage Mr. Jayan Mehta, Managing Director of Amul.
Very warm welcome on to the stage, sir. Joining him for the discussion, Sushma Kaushik, founding partner, 108 Capital. Of course, put your hands together, ladies and gentlemen, for Ghazal Alaq, co-founder Mama Earth, and Akhil Gupta, co-founder and CTO, No Broker. Please get onto the stage, ladies and gentlemen. Requesting TV9's Krishna Kumar to take over proceedings of the panel. Over to you, Krishna.
All right then, we're smack in the middle of noon actually, so difficult to say good morning or good afternoon, but technically it is good afternoon. So a very warm good afternoon to all those who have come here for the News9 Global Summit. And right now it's important that we put the focus on one of India's most buzzing themes globally, the startups of India. And right here on the panel are people associated with this booming startup ecosystem. Let's face it, last year, India overtook UK to become the third largest startup ecosystem in the world, ladies and gentlemen, with more than 1 lakh registered startups with India's Startup India mission. Big round of applause for that. India is the third largest startup ecosystem in the world, beating the United Kingdom. And it was also the year where there were many headlines about, is there a funding winter? Are startups in India getting enough funding? Are people willing to fund? Are startups in India doing things the right way? Because so many startups in the headlines for all the wrong reasons also. But then again, another year in which stellar startups went to list themselves on stock exchanges with blockbuster listings, right? Startups which listed on Indian stock exchanges became multi-bagger stocks. You know, the news goes back and forth. But the problem here is that the word startup is a new terminology. We here in India have been doing startups for a very, very long time. Startups from the grassroots level, from a very long time. So we're going to be discussing all of that. We're not going to be getting stuck on these terminologies called startups. We're talking about businesses. Individuals who are starting businesses and going on to become great success stories to inspire Indians and to inspire the world. So I'm going to start with the oldest startup on this panel. Ladies and gentlemen, big hand for Mr. Jayant Mehta, Managing Director of Amul. Who here does not have Amul butter? Who knows any other butter apart from Amul? Let's start it from there actually. You know, this is not, it's just a joke. I mean, this is a company which began at the grassroots level. It was a tier 2 startup back in the day. And today we're talking about how venture capitalists in India are actively funding tier 2 and tier 3 startups. It still feels like a startup, Mr. Mehta, with your innovations, with your fresh energy, with every product launch, competing with the global giants entering the Indian market. Do you still think and work like a startup?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having a Dudhwala on the show. I was just wondering in this elite panel, how do I get featured? Then I did my little bit of investigation. I tried to find out who is the anchor of this show. And I found he is Krishna. So with Krishna himself there, Doodh aur Makhan to hona hi hai. And that was grateful for making me here talk about the Amul startup story. As you are right, Amul started in 1946 with just 2 village cooperative societies and 250 liters of milk. And this model has grown leaps and bounds. Today, we are doing a turnover of 80,000 crores, which is $10 billion, 36 lakh farmers, 18,600 villages, and you know the number of products and the dairy plants and all that we have. So this is where it's a demonstration of a power of collective. Small marginal farmers coming together, most of them women, all getting into a startup mode with owning of 2, 4, 6 cows or buffaloes, using the power of a cooperative model to collect milk, which is one of the most perishable agricultural products in the country, which spoils in just 3 to 4 hours. You collect this milk from across the large geography of our country, particularly Gujarat in our case, And more importantly, when countries make brands, and people talk about brands, they say America has great brands, Japan has great brands. Here it's this model which led to India becoming the largest producer of milk in the world. So the replication of model from Gujarat to across the country, 200,000 villages, members of the cooperatives, which has more than 1.7 crore families, and this is what makes a lot of difference. And what results is also not just nutrition for 1.4 billion people like us as citizens, but also livelihood to 10 crore families. So this is what a cooperative implemented in the right way, connecting the producer with the consumer, focus on the access to the market, remunerative price to the producer, which means you spend 100 rupees on Amul, 85 rupees goes back to the farmer, and delighting the customer with a variety of value-added products, which will make both consumers happy and the producers.
Everything you just said, I can see Ghazal just like nodding along, because that just sounds like a new age startup, doesn't it?
It's a source of inspiration for me. I would listen to each and every word that
So from the oldest startup, the reason why I'm going to Ghazal is that from the oldest startup on this panel to the newest startup on the panel. Ghazal, talk to us about Mama
Earth. So Mama Earth is just 7 years old. We started in 2016. We took the company public last year, so that has been the long and the short journey of it. I think, you know, what has worked in our favor has been the startup ecosystem that we are talking about, right? The country is placed at a position right now where the world is taking a note of what we are doing. And I think for us, this small brand which started as a personal problem where a mother was trying to solve you know, the problem of finding the right kind of natural toxin-free products for her child. And that leading to becoming a business where now we have not just one brand, which is Mama Earth, but 6 brands that we have crafted in 7 years. I think that's the beauty of the startup ecosystem here in India. And yeah, we are just getting started. So like Sir said, it is such a long journey of any startup that exists. We've just taken our first step, and we are aiming to take iBeauty, which is the India beauty, to the world through our company.
Well, 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 we are at the News9 Global Summit. We're taking India to the world with the News9 Global Summit. We want what better people than Ghazal Alag who are taking iBeauty, Indian beauty, to the world. I'm just going to take this across to No Broker because the reason is that you come under the classic definition of the term startup. Yes. A technology-enabled product meant for urban Indians. And the reason why I'm talking to you is that we just spoke to Mr. Mehta. When it comes to scaling up and sustaining, Amul is like an epitome of scaling up and sustaining. And sustaining is not the right word. Scaling up and, you know, breaking through all barriers and dominating, world domination. Scaling up and world domination is what Amul does. Tell us, from No Broker's perspective, it's a very, very important need gap that you fill with No Broker. An extremely consumer-centric service. Talk to us, what is your mantra when it comes to scaling up and sustaining No Broker?
First of all, thanks for having us, and really inspiring to be in panel with somebody like who has been running Amul. For No Broker, I think it's again, as Ghazal said, it was out of our problem. So when we were looking for houses, we realized that for a very little value what a broker is adding, we are paying atrociously high intermediation cost, which goes up to 18% for a rental of 11 months. And that's when we said, रोटी कपड़ा और मकान, ये 3 चीज़ें हैं, ये एसेंशियल हैं. मकान में कोई कुछ नहीं कर रहा है, रोटी और कपड़ा में फिर भी स्टार्टअप है. एंड दैट्स व्हेन वी थॉट कि जैसे टेक्नोलॉजी is the way technology is revolutionizing all other startups, all other sectors. Why can't we have something which can remove intermediary and add value with the use of technology? And with that simple mantra, we started. We thought we'll just do the rentals. We will help people buy house, get houses on rent, and we will save brokerage for them, which is like 20-25,000 rupees each side. And as in when we started doing it, the kind of love, we realized that there is no brand in real estate. This is a trust deficit economy. India mein har aadmi, they are scared of doing a real estate transaction because they really don't have anybody who can help them with this particular thing. So no broker came up as a trusted entity in the real estate transaction. And as the path happened, as the time flies, we realize that this problem is not only for the rental, it is there for buying, it is there for selling. And when we had the customer trust, like Amul has, we said, okay, what else our customer needs? And that's when we realized that a customer needs cleaning services. They need to move when they have found the houses. They need to have the legal assistance when they are buying the houses. They need to manage their societies with the technology. So No Broker started almost 9 years back, and now we are present in top 6 cities in India. By far the largest PropTech company in India, the only unicorn out of India. And it's a long, long journey. So we take inspiration from Amul. So we have just started. So these guys are the oldest startup, and we will want to be the oldest real estate startup in India at some point of time.
You know, I can't think, you know, yours is a brand where the brand name is the tagline. No broker. You say that, and then people are like, yeah, I want to try that. Exactly. Where can I go do something where there is no broker involved, there's no middleman involved? So it's fascinating. Great name for a product. I mean, it's easy to say Mama Earth, what a beautiful name for a product and a brand. But then again, No Broker is also a beautiful name for a product, for a service. I'm going to come to the other part of this. In the introduction, I was talking about great stories, great startups, fantastic. But the year 2023, if you read anything about startups anywhere, online or on TV, anything, it's all about no funding. Funding levels are back to 2017, if I'm not mistaken. Sushma, so the thing is that they say there's a funding winter. But you go and talk to venture capitalists, they'll say, what funding winter? There's enough and more money chasing the right ideas and the right startups. But the fact of the matter is that the numbers tell a different story. 2022, we crossed over 100 unicorns in this country. 2023, we barely had 2. Zepto and Incred. That's all. Something happened in 2023. Are we looking at a turnaround in 2024? What is happening in the fundings area as far as Indian startups are concerned?
Thanks so much for having me here today. And, you know, it looks like I'm in the minority when it comes to capital discussions in the startup ecosystem. But Krishna,
very important minority.
Very important. No, but if we ask Ghazal, she'll tell you there was no funding winter when she went for IPO, right? It was
not for her. Not for her. We're not talking about her.
Not for her. But it's just an indicator of the kind of capital that is available in India today, right? There are close to 70 private equity VC funds that have raised over $15 billion of dry powder that they're sitting on to deploy in 2023. And foreign direct investments is close to $70 billion last year, right? So there's clearly a lot of capital that is available in the ecosystem. But don't look at it as just the capital that is available. Let's take a step back and see what happened in 2021, 2022. There was a lot of easy money that was flowing around, right? And it was a factor of multiple things. It was the macro conditions, interest rates were lower, money was easy, right? And all that easy money went into funding a lot of things. Some good startups, some great startups, right? And when you are trying to fund innovation, like No Broker, when it started, it was not a playbook that everyone had seen and known. They had to innovate as they went along. That requires money, right? And that is what this startup innovation is funding. And you have to give it some leeway that, yes, there will be mistakes, but great businesses will come out of this. And so that is what happened in the last few years. What you're seeing today is a pause. People want to sit back and see where that money is going. Are these going to go from good to great businesses, or are they going to go from good to dud businesses? You'll win some, you'll lose some, but I think some great businesses are going to come out of this.
It's like a test match, right? Like one session you will be ahead, one session will be behind. Eventually you have to win the test match in 4 days. And hopefully India is going to wrap this up as quickly as possible for the day. But I'm going to ask Vijay and Mehta, there's a lesson over there. When money comes, when money comes to scale up a business, you know, tell us, you know, and also money goes into technology. Just because you describe yourself as a dudwala doesn't mean there is so much of technological integration that goes into Amul and developing brand Amul and all the products of Amul. Talk to us about how do you take in funds and you deploy funds for everything from technology to distribution.
I think you made a very important point, and connecting with what my fellow panelists have been telling. There are many things which get into making a great business. But for the farmer, end of the day, and this is one thing which I have practiced and we believe in, is money makes milk. So that's where you have to connect and find out what matters most. And to do that, you have to do everything what it takes to make the business very efficient and very, very cost effective. And that's where technology comes in and plays a very big role. Ever since the early days, I mean, we talk about AI and we talked about a session here which was talking about AI, but dairy industry has been practicing AI since a long time because the productivity comes out of the AI that we do, and that's artificial insemination. But that's how we improve the breed of the cattle, improve the productivity and more money for the producer. That is the best part of deployment of technology, using the best bulls, getting the best semen, using AI at the field and helping improve the productivity of the cattle. In the next 10 years, today India is producing say 1/4 of the total milk in the world. In the next 10 years, it will be 1/3 of the total milk in the world. So we have a chance to be the dairy to the world. But that doesn't mean you will have extra cattle to do that. So with the same cattle, with better productivity, you're able to deliver that. So breeding, feeding, more importantly, the processes of collection of milk, using sophisticated testing equipments, fat, SNF, adulteration at the village level, to using the best technology to process milk, launching a variety of products, using a distribution network to take care of the requirements of the customer, going direct to customers like her. I mean, though a legacy distribution house with more than 1 million directly serviced retail outlets, 20,000 distributors, 85 branch offices, for new products, we say going direct to customer also is a way forward, and think and learn and work like a startup. So this is where a complete cow to consumer, a fully integrated tech IT company, every single transaction for each of the 36 lakh farmers, twice a day is recorded on a common software, in form an app which the farmer can see, an SMS of a transaction like we do banking transactions, to on Google you can see every single outlet which sells Amul product.
Wow.
So this is where the technology comes in, cost effectiveness comes in, and that's how you succeed, because you pass on the largest share of the consumer's rupee to the producer. And believe me, when I say more than 85% goes back to the producer, use an international benchmark. In Europe, in US, in Australia, New Zealand, any developed country of the world, producer gets only 1/3 share of a consumer's dollar or a euro or a pound. So this is where all the factors come in, and you have to see the harmony in all of this to make it happen.
Wow. How many of us knew that Amul doodh that we get, the butter that we get, the amount of technology that goes into procuring that milk and making it, churning it into butter? He's talking about globally how only 1/3 of the cost goes to the farmers. That's why farmers in Europe are protesting. We have delegates here from Europe over here. Farmers across Europe are protesting. About how enough money doesn't, and they're throwing the milk on the floors. Not here in India. And even if there are protests, we deal with them very, very well. Not the problem over here. But the question over here is that, Ghazal, you're looking at how technology is integrated, but here you are, a new age brand who did the opposite of Amul. Amul went to the stores first and made sure that the product was available in the physical stores. Your product was available online first, and now in the next stage of development, you're talking about the physical presence of your product in stores. Talk to us, how was this transition? First, marketing it directly online, taking the bull by the horn. We are in a social media age. How did you do that? And how do you now turning away from that for a physical presence of your products in stores?
So very interesting. I think I would start by saying that for us at Mamaearth, it was not an option. It was more a necessity. We did not have any kind of experience or large amount of money to directly target offline stores. And what we realized very early on was, when you're in an offline shop, there are 500 different brands who've kept their products. For a consumer to walk in and for you to grab consumers' attention to say, you know what, I'm the new child on the block, check me out, it's very difficult unless you spend a lot of money which shouts out visibility, which shouts out attention, breaking spanners, and the amount of money that you need to do that in just one store and multiply it by, even if you want to start with just one city, was way high than what we could fathom. On the other hand, technology actually has been a very, very inherent part of us growing up. till today, not just, it started with direct to consumers where we realized that sitting anywhere in the world, just from one location, one warehouse, you can actually target consumers pan-India, seek their interest, show them your product, and then get them to consider buying you, right? That's where we started from. And the amount of money that you needed for that was far less compared to, and I could target consumers pan-India, whereas physically I was just able to target at best one small location in Delhi and then possibly expand to different clusters and go from there, right? So it wasn't an option, it was more of the only channel that we understood really well.
But who said doing it on social media is easy? That's also as crowded as it gets. To get mind space and attention with your online advertising, is also a big challenge, isn't it?
But we did that ourselves. Varun and I did that ourselves. It's all about content and the end of it, right? To grab attention. So from the content that goes out on the labels of the products to how the product will look to what the ad will say. Most importantly, one insight that we understood was, and because I was a new mother, I was trusting other mothers more than I was trusting brands because brands didn't listen. While my fellow mothers listened, heard, suggested, and then even
target
after
consumer.
That, absolutely right. And that was the insight that we picked up, that if mothers trust other mothers, this is a brand that is being started by a mother. And it started with an insight that we are going to be a beauty and personal care brand which is going to listen to you, craft products basis your needs, deliver to you, and then also take feedback. So the cycle doesn't end once you've bought our product. It actually continues beyond that for the next 6 months where we are just seeking feedback on how we are doing. That holds true for us still today. And I think that was the 2 or 3 things which helped us gain that attention from our consumers, and we sort of moved forward.
You're literally giving the playbook away on stage. You're literally, for all those
Almost
watching,
there.
that's how you build a brand from scratch in today's online age. I'm going to quickly come to Akhil. The thing is that we are at a time when, as Sushma was telling us, there is no time, there's no shortage of money. If you need money, there is money, there is money that's going to come in. The reason I'm asking you is that when it comes to deployment of that money, yours is a fully tech product. It's not about tech integration. It is a full-on tech product, but tell us, how do you do it when it comes to deploying money and scaling up in a sustainable way? Because of so many startups being found fault with for not scaling up, first making these big bang announcements and then eventually going back, So tell us, how does No Broker do it?
Sure. So 2 things. So basically, as you rightly said, there's no dearth of money. As Sushma was saying, maybe it's a marathon, we have just taken a pause. And for good companies, money is still available. 10 years back, when we started, ecosystem was very naive in terms of the VCs which were available. It took us 18 months of bootstrapping to raise money. And we almost gave away all the savings, me, Amit and Saurabh, almost all the savings what we had. And then Elevation Capital came in to save us. But
18 months of bootstrapping,
18 months of bootstrapping. But see, the thing is, one thing fundamentally 3 of us have always believed and done is that we have not been splurging money. So we see, you need to understand which sector you are in. So we are in real estate. We are not a food delivery company where we start offering 50% discount and people will start buying food. So we can't do random marketing. There have been companies in PropTech who have plastered city with the boarding, with the hoardings and the ads, assuming people will start renting house and buying houses. It doesn't happen that way. You need to understand what goes in your industry, how do people react, and what they need. So that's one fundamental which we have taken forward, where we have always believed in solving the customer problem as in when they need it. So in case of No Broker, somebody took a house once, they found without a broker, they saved money. They told 5 other friends of theirs who started using it, snowballing started happening. They came back after a year or 2, they again rented a house. By then we started selling houses. They bought a house. When they bought a house, they realized that we have home services. They started using our services, which is packers, movers, cleaning, maybe interiors. So it's a long journey, correct? You just, by getting the money, it will not happen, as you rightly said, Krishna, that you just start plaguing city with the ads and you think, okay, making big announcements will get customers to you. It will not happen. Anything which goes up very fast comes down also very fast according to me.
Talk about that.
So it takes time to build long-lasting brands and companies according to me.
And that's why I wanted to ask you, how do you choose now? How do you choose where to put the money where the mouth is? Because we've seen everything in the Indian startup ecosystem. We've seen great unicorn stories, and let's not forget, we don't make enough unicorns. Consider the market that we have, considering the size of the ecosystem that we have, 100 unicorns is nothing. We have to make tons of unicorns in this country, don't we?
So, Krishna, that's a good question, but I will tread carefully here. For a country like ours, it's not just the unicorns that make us who we are, right? We have 1 lakh startups. Sure, some of them will become unicorns and they will tread their journey. But we need a lot more solid, scalable, sustainable businesses, not necessarily having the unicorn tag. And for that to happen, I think the entire ecosystem should be careful and should be responsible when you're creating these businesses. And hence, being a responsible investor is what differentiates investors.
How do you do that? Don't just say responsible. Tell us, how do you do it?
Sure. No, it is hard, right? Like one of the hardest things for any investor is to say no. We see close to 100 deals a week. We do 5 deals a year. So there are more no's going out than yes. And hence, obviously, there is some AI that happens in our heads as well for us
HI, human intelligence.
HI, AI, whatever you want to call it, but that happens all the time. And in spite of that, there are mistakes that happen, right? So that is how difficult the role giving capital out is. And so to be a responsible investor is, at least in my mental model, is people, planet, society. If these 3 things are not negatively impacted, and yet the business is able to show growth, as well as great unit economics, then it's a no-brainer.
All the 3 startups on this panel, the 3 things you mentioned, people, planet, society, all 3 of them, they do all 3 of them. Ladies and gentlemen, huge round of applause for all the 3 people over here who contribute positively to people, planet, and society. That's who we have on the startup session over here. And I'm going to take this back to Ghazal and Mr. Mehta. Mr. Mehta, going forward, once upon a time, Amul was fairly alone as far as being able to push its products over there. How did you do this? How are you still a dominant player when the who's who of food products majors in the world have entered the Indian market? You still deliver the best prices to the consumers. You still deliver a brand experience. They say, it's all about love that the brand creates for you. You still have that X factor of love from your ad campaigns. I mean, we talk about Apple's ad campaigns and marketing creating love in the hearts of the consumer. Amul, ladies and gentlemen, that is an ad campaign that 4 generations have fallen in love with and continue to fall in love with. The Gen Z is also in love with it. So, from here on, talk to us in terms of dealing and dominating in a competitive marketplace. One thing is to start at a grassroots level and then being able to do it. And the other thing is when the marketplace becomes crowded, becomes extremely competitive. There are bigger players as big as you or bigger than coming into the... How do you deal with that?
You raised 2 very important points. Let's deal with the first one, is the competition. We love competition. For a simple reason that because there is competition, there is more share of noise of that category goes up in the market. And that's where when you as a strong brand and a respected brand gain out of it. You talked about advertising, and that's what demonstrates the power of consistency. You won't believe we spend less than 1% of our turnover on advertising. All private multinationals, and she would be a witness, 5 to 12% on advertising is what they spend. We spend less than 1% of our turnover on advertising.
And yet the most creative,
but it is the consistency in communication, and you can give credit to that 6-year-old Amul girl who makes the brand stay young and touching everybody. We talked about a lot of numbers for Amul, but we internally believe that our currency is not milk. Our currency is trust. And if you have the trust of the customer and the customer knows that he or she is going to get the best quality product at the most affordable price, she is going to buy your product. And that is what is being practiced, and not just talk, but also practiced in every single thing we do, every single work, every single process, every single product. And that is what drives this entire thing.
All right, that's the simple message, and that message rings true across the startups over here and the person who funds startups. It's been a message in unison from all three very different startups, and one from another set of, another different ecosystem of funding ecosystem altogether, but the message is the same. Build scalable businesses. India has 1 lakh startups. India needs 2 lakh startups. Scalable businesses, and not 100 unicorns, 200, 300 unicorns or more if it's possible.
Can I talk about the unicorn concept of the cooperatives?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'll take a minute. I spoke about the power of the cooperative model. And fortunately now a new Ministry of Cooperation at the central level came in. The political side of your channel will talk about double engine Sarkar.
Yes.
The business side or the cooperative side is what one needs to top, is a double engine Sahakar. Because there is a Ministry of Cooperation at every state, there is a Minister of Cooperation at the central level, and irrespective of the political colors, the work for the Ministry of Cooperation is to support every single cooperative in the country. This led to formation of 3 new multi-state cooperatives in the last few months. One is multi-state cooperative on exports, second on organics, and third on seeds. We've been the chief promoter of this multi-state cooperative on exports, along with NCDC, NAFED, IFCO, CRIPCO, the top 5 cooperatives of the country. You won't believe that the order book of this multi-state cooperative on exports is more than 15,000 crore rupees.
Wow.
So here, when you say unicorn is $1 billion in dollars in valuation, here there is actually $2 billion in turnover. And nobody even knows about these things. So this is the power of cooperatives being leveraged.
Fair enough, sir.
Amul today is where it is because it got access to the market of Bombay.
Right.
And we are talking 75 years back. Today, if you imagine every single cooperative of the country, every single farmer who is a member of a cooperative gets access to 180 countries market in the world, you can imagine the growth and prosperity of the country and the vision of Honorable Prime Minister and the Minister of Cooperation to actually leapfrog from a developing country to a developed country in the shortest possible time.
Absolutely. And again, unicorns are about valuations. He's talking about $2 billion in turnover. That's what we need to go forward. But I'm afraid we've completely run out of time here on this discussion. Fascinating discussion, ladies and gentlemen. Huge round of applause for all the panelists who have taken time out to share some very important thoughts on building businesses from the grassroots here in India. Thank you, Mr. Jayan Mehta. Thank you, Ghazal Lala. Thank you, Sushma Kaushik, and Mr. Akhil Gupta. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Krishna. Remember, you are with us on TV9, What India Thinks Today. This is the second day, the News9 Global Summit presented by Poonawalla Fincore. We also have our special partners, Priya Gold, Finolex Cables, co-powered by Priya Gold and Finolex Cables, as well as Servacon and Prabhuji Pure Food. Let's quickly take a look.
Every once in a while, a success story comes along that redefines and reshapes everything. Welcome to the world of Poonawalla Fincorp, where upwards is the only way to go. We operate on a simple philosophy and vision to be the most trusted financial services brand and to help individuals and businesses to achieve more by offering the best-in-class customer-centric products and solutions. In short, to be a pillar of support to people from different walks of life, with a focus on ethical, transparent, and end-to-end digital lending. Our products, service, and philosophy resonated with the customers, allowing us to script a historic business story. With a record-breaking turnaround time in the history of financial sectors in India, the current valuation of the company stands at over $4 billion. 2023 has witnessed an exponential rise in our business valuation. In just 2 years, Poonawalla Fincorp has managed to race ahead faster than any other player in the finance sector. Behind this phenomenal growth story is a hard-working team, led by leaders with a razor-sharp vision, who are bound by our values of credit. Every team member involved in this success is valued at Poonawalla Fincorp. Through everything we do, our values and culture shine through. With a relentless passion for excellence, we are on our way to enabling dreams for millions of Indians. Poonawalla Fincorp, enabling dreams.
All right then, ladies and gentlemen.
Presented by Poonawalla Fincorp, enabling dreams. Co-powered by Sugar Free, एक छोटा सा चेंज फॉर फिटनेस. बनेगा तो बढ़ेगा इंडिया. अल्ट्राटेक देश का नंबर 1 सीमेंट. नो स्ट्रेस फिनोलेक्स. प्रिया गोल्ड बटर डिलाइट बिस्किट्स कलौंजी के साथ मक्खन का तड़का. स्पेशल पार्टनर प्रभु जी मिठाई हो या नमकीन,